In Victorian London, over 1 million people lived in crushing poverty, with hundreds of thousands experiencing homelessness or dwelling in squalid slums that reeked of human waste and disease. If you were unfortunate enough to end up on these brutal streets, your only protection from freezing to death, violent assault, or police harassment was to pay for one of 3 nightmarish shelter options: a penny sit-up, a 2-penny hangover, or a 4-penny coffin. Here's what life was really like for those forced to choose between these barely human sleeping arrangements. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep? All right, Victorian London tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really. Check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. The rain is coming down sideways. You can feel it seeping through the holes in your boots, through the threadbare coat that's more patch than original fabric. It's not even proper rain. It's that London mixture of water, soot, and God knows what else that turns everything it touches a shade darker. Night is falling, and you've got 3 pennies to your name. Now, I know what you're thinking. 3 pennies? That's nothing. But in 1880s London, 3 pennies is the difference between sleeping somewhat sheltered or not sleeping at all. It's the difference between maybe waking up tomorrow or definitely not. See, the police don't let you just sleep anywhere. That's not how Victorian London works. The moment an officer spots you nodding off in a doorway or under a bridge, you'll get a swift kick and an order to move along. The wealthy don't want to see you. You're a blemish on their pristine city. And in their eyes, your poverty is a moral failing, something you've brought on yourself. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture of this city for a second. London in the 1880s was actually 2 cities existing in the same space. One was glittering with wealth, the centre of a global empire where 1/5 of the world's population was under British rule. This London had grand department stores, elegant restaurants and theatres, where the upper classes flaunted their ridiculous wealth. And then there was your London, a labyrinth of narrow, filth-choked alleys where raw sewage ran in open gutters, where families of 10 crammed into single rooms, where children with distended bellies from malnutrition played in streets littered with horse manure and industrial waste. You're basically thinking, this is fine, everything's fine, but it's not fine. None of this is fine. The smell alone would knock you flat if you weren't used to it. A visitor from the country once described it as the stench of 1,000 privies mixed with rotting vegetables and the unique aroma of unwashed humanity. That's putting it nicely. In reality, it was so much worse. You'd been working all day when there was work to be had. Maybe you were a mudlark wading through the sewage-filled Thames at low tide, looking for anything of value. Coins, pieces of coal, metal scraps. Maybe you were a crossing sweeper, clearing paths through the horse dung so wealthy ladies and gentlemen wouldn't soil their shoes. Or maybe you were a match girl, dipping matches in toxic white phosphorus that made your jaw literally rot away. Whatever your gig was, it earned you a handful of pennies. Not enough for proper lodgings, not nearly enough for that. So as darkness falls and the cold really starts to bite, you're faced with the nightly decision that thousands of London's poor had to make: where to sleep. Just go to the workhouse, some smart-ass middle-class reformer might suggest. Yeah, no, the workhouse is the absolute last resort. You know what happens there. Families split up, back-breaking labour, soul-crushing regimentation. People who enter the workhouse often don't come out. It's essentially prison for the crime of being poor. Someone in the street looks at you and says, "You don't want to end up in there, mate. Better to try your luck at one of them Sally Army places." The Sally Army, that's what people called the Salvation Army. Founded in 1865, they were trying something different. Instead of just preaching, they were actually doing something for the destitute. But don't get too excited. Their help came with conditions, and their shelters were far from luxurious. As you walk through the darkening streets, stomach gnawing with hunger, you mentally count your options. You've got 3 pennies. That means you've got choices. Terrible ones, but choices nonetheless. For 1 penny, you could get a sit-up. For 2 pennies, a hangover. And for 4 pennies, well, you're 1 penny short of the coffin. Okay, so picture this. You're trudging through the East End past gin shops and pawn shops and women selling themselves on corners, past children as young as 5 begging or picking pockets. The lucky ones are selling matches or flowers. The unlucky ones are doing much worse things to survive. A man next to you suddenly doubles over in a coughing fit. You step away quickly. Could be consumption. That's tuberculosis to you and me. Could be typhoid. Could be cholera. Disease spreads like wildfire through these streets, and no one's coming to put out the flames. Now, I should mention something important here. Nobody just casually ended up homeless in Victorian London. This wasn't like today, where sometimes a few bad breaks can land you on the street. No, Victorian homelessness was usually the result of a catastrophic chain of events that stripped away every single safety net you might have had. Maybe your husband died, leaving you with 5 children and no income. Maybe you lost your job when the factory mechanized and didn't need as many workers. Maybe you got injured and couldn't work. Maybe you were an orphan thrown out of the orphanage at 14 with no skills and nowhere to go. Whatever the reason, once you ended up on the streets, climbing back up was nearly impossible. The systems weren't designed to help you get back on your feet. They were designed to punish you for falling in the first place. You're now approaching Blackfriars, where one of the Salvation Army's largest shelters stands. From a distance, you can see a line already forming. Men in tattered clothes, women clutching shawls around their shoulders, a few children, though most homeless children didn't make it to shelters. They huddled together in alleys or under bridges, forming little protective groups. The closer you get, the more you can smell the assembled crowd. It's not their fault. When you haven't bathed in months and own only the clothes on your back, you're going to smell. You probably don't smell any better. "Hey, you going in?" asks a grizzled old man, missing most of his teeth. Better hurry if you want a spot. They fill up quick on cold nights. You nod and join the queue. Around you, people are coughing, muttering, arguing over spots in line. A woman is trying to quiet a fussy baby. An elderly man looks like he might collapse at any moment. "First time?" the toothless man asks. "Is it that obvious?" you reply. He laughs. A dry, rattling sound. Everyone remembers their first night in the sit-up. Name's Jack, by the way. Been doing this dance for years now. "What's it like in there?" you ask, trying not to sound as nervous as you feel. Jack scratches his matted beard. "Depends what you're paying for. Got all 3 pennies? Go for the hangover if you can. Sit-up's torture, I'll tell you that straight. Can't sleep sitting up, and they don't let you even if you could. Got monitors walking around making sure no one's head drops. Spend the extra penny. Trust me." The line inches forward as the doors open. You can feel your heart pounding. This is it. Your first night in a homeless shelter. Something you never thought would happen to you. Inside, a stern-faced Salvation Army officer in a neat uniform takes your penny. The contrast between his clean appearance and the filthy crowd is stark. He looks at you without really seeing you. You're just another body to process. "New?" he asks, noticing your hesitation. You nod. "Straight through. Find a seat on the benches. No sleeping, no drinking, no fighting, out at 6 in the morning. And with that, you're officially admitted to a penny sit-up. The hall is large and dimly lit by a few oil lamps that cast long shadows. Rows of wooden benches fill the space, already crowding with humanity. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and the lingering scent of whatever soup was served earlier. It's warmer than outside at least, though calling it warm would be a stretch. It's just less cold. You find a spot on a bench, squeezed between Jack and a man who's mumbling to himself. Across from you sits a young woman, maybe 20, with hollow cheeks and darting eyes. She catches you looking and glares. "What you staring at?" she snaps. "Sorry," you mutter, looking away. Jack leans in. "Don't mind Mary. Been on the streets since she was 13. Makes you prickly, that does." You look around and notice something else. There's absolutely nothing else in this room. No tables, no chairs, no beds, just benches and people. Hundreds of people, all trying to exist in this limbo between homelessness and the workhouse. A Salvation Army worker stands at the front of the room, Bible in hand. "Before we settle in for the night, we'll have a reading from Scripture and a prayer." Some groan quietly. Others straighten up, genuinely interested. Most just stare blankly, too tired to care one way or another. This was part of the deal with Salvation Army shelters. They helped you, but they also preached to you. It was the price of admission, beyond the penny. After the sermon, which you barely hear through your exhaustion, the long night begins. And when I say long, I mean interminable. The bench is hard, pressing uncomfortably against your spine. Every time your chin drops to your chest and your eyes flutter closed, a monitor taps you with a stick. "No sleeping," they remind you. "Sit up." Around midnight, the man next to you, not Jack, the mumbler on the other side, starts coughing violently. Each hack seems to come from the depths of his lungs, wet and rattling. You try to edge away, but there's nowhere to go. "Consumption," Jack whispers. "Poor bastard won't last the winter." The night crawls by. Your back aches, your eyes burn, your stomach growls. The penny didn't include food, just the privilege of sitting on this bench. Now here's where I should mention something that the history books often leave out. The conversation, because despite the misery, despite the exhaustion, people talked, they shared stories, they commiserated, they even sometimes found moments of dark humour. "You know what they call this place?" Jack asks, gesturing around the grim hall. "What?" "The House of Despair." He chuckles. "Cheerful, innit?" A woman across from you joins in. "Better than what my Billy calls it. He says it's the waiting room for the cemetery." "Your Billy's not wrong," says another man. "Last winter I counted 7 what didn't wake up in here. Just found 'em sitting there, stiff as boards, come morning." "That true?" you ask, horrified. Jack shrugs. "More or less. Cold gets to some, sickness gets to others. Some just give up." The Reverend George Edwards, a vicar who once disguised himself as a vagrant to experience these shelters firsthand, described one such place as having the leaden weight of exhaustion and despair. He wasn't exaggerating. As dawn approaches, you haven't slept at all. Your body aches in ways you didn't think possible. Your eyes feel like they're full of sand. At precisely 6 in the morning, a bell rings. The Salvation Army workers begin ushering everyone out. No breakfast, no coffee, just back onto the streets you go. "Where do people go now?" you ask Jack as you stumble outside, the pale winter sun doing nothing to warm your bones. "Depends," he says. "Some try to find work. Some beg. Some go to the soup kitchens if they can find one. Most just wander until they can get enough pennies together for tomorrow night." And that's the brutal cycle of Victorian homelessness, scraping together enough to avoid sleeping on the streets, spending uncomfortable nights in barely human conditions, then being thrown back out to start all over again. As you stand there, watching your breath form clouds in the frigid morning air, you realize something. This is your life now. Tomorrow night, you'll have to make the same choice. 1 penny for a sit-up, 2 for a hangover, or somehow find 4 for a coffin. Unlike you right now, safely tucked in your warm, comfortable bed, these people had no certainty about where they'd sleep the next night. No guarantee of food, no promise of safety. The most fortunate might eventually find steady work, maybe even a room to rent. Most would continue this desperate cycle until disease, cold, or violence claimed them. The average life expectancy in Victorian slums was just 30 years. Jack claps you on the shoulder. "First night's the hardest," he says, though you're not sure you believe him. "Come on, I know where we might get some bread if we're quick." And with that, you follow your new friend into another day of survival in Victorian London, already dreading the night to come and wondering if you should save your pennies for a 2-penny hangover instead, because at least then you might actually get some sleep. But that, my friend, is a story for another part of our night. That's the penny sit-up, the cheapest and most miserable option for Victorian London's homeless. Next, we'll see what 2 pennies could buy you, and whether the so-called hangover was any improvement at all. Meanwhile, as you listen to this, maybe pull that blanket a little tighter. Feel the soft mattress beneath you, the clean sheets against your skin, the knowledge that you're safe, warm, and sheltered. These simple comforts would have seemed like unimaginable luxury to the homeless of Victorian London, forced to choose between the streets, the workhouse, or places like the penny sit-up, where even sleep was too much to ask for. Dawn breaks over London like it's doing you a personal favour, pale, weak light filtering through the infamous fog. Your back is one giant knot from the penny sit-up. Your empty stomach sounds like it's trying to digest itself. Welcome to another day of trying not to die in Victorian London. Jack, your newfound companion in misery, nudges you. "Come on, gotta move quick if we want breakfast." You follow him through streets already buzzing with activity. Children as young as 5 are heading to factories. Street vendors are setting up. Costermongers push carts piled with questionable vegetables. The whole machine of London grinding into motion, caring nothing for those it crushes beneath its gears. "Where are we going?" you ask, trying to keep up despite your exhaustion. Jack grins, revealing the few teeth he has left. Church mission on Whitechapel. They give bread and tea if you listen to a sermon. Small price to pay for a full belly. The mission is already crowded when you arrive. Dozens of men and women in various states of dishevelment stand in a ragged line. A stern-faced woman in a plain dress stands at the door, eyeing each person critically before allowing them inside. "No drunks," she announces loudly. "Anyone smelling of gin will be turned away." You glance at Jack, who shrugs. "Gotta play by their rules if you want their bread." Inside, you're herded onto wooden benches. The smell of weak tea and day-old bread makes your stomach growl embarrassingly loud. The minister, a thin man with earnest eyes, stands before you all. "Before we feed your bodies, we must feed your souls," he intones. Jack leans over. "This one's not bad. Keeps it short. Some go on for an hour while your breakfast gets cold." The sermon is mercifully brief, 10 minutes of fire and brimstone about the evils of drink and how poverty is God's way of testing your moral fibre. You find it hard not to laugh at that last bit. Easy to moralise about poverty when you've got a warm bed and food in your belly. When it's over, you receive your reward. A mug of tea so weak you can see the bottom, and a chunk of bread that could break a window. Still, it's food. You devour it in seconds. Slow down, Jack advises. Make it last. Might be all you get today. What now? You ask, already dreading the answer. Now? Jack finishes his tea. Now we work. Got to get them pennies for tonight, don't we? And that's the brutal reality of street life in Victorian London. The constant hustle for pennies. Every single day you need to somehow scrape together enough money for that night's shelter. And if you want to eat, that's extra. What kind of work, you ask? Jack looks you up and down. Depends what you can do. Can you sing? You shake your head. Good with your hands? Strong back? You shrug non-committally. Well, he says, there's always pure finding. Pure finding? That's what we call it. Looking for things to sell. Anything. Rags, bones, metal, horse dung. Horse dung? Your face must show your disgust. Good money in it, Jack says defensively. Tanners buy it, and there's plenty of it around. He's not wrong. The streets of Victorian London were carpeted with the stuff. Over 300,000 horses lived and worked in the city, each producing around 35 pounds of manure daily. Do the math. That's millions of pounds of horse shit dropped onto London streets every single day. Come on, Jack says. I'll show you the ropes. For the next few hours, you follow Jack through the maze of London streets, learning the fine art of scavenging. He shows you which pubs put out decent scraps, which areas have the best pickings for rags, which policemen will look the other way if you're quick, and which ones take pleasure in giving you a beating. Never go near the rookeries alone, he warns, pointing toward a particularly grim-looking alley. That's the worst of the slums. Even the police don't go in there. You go in, you might not come out. The rookeries were London's most notorious slums. Places like Seven Dials, the Old Nickel, and parts of Whitechapel. They weren't just poor, they were dangerous labyrinths where crime was the primary industry. By midday, your pockets hold a few carefully collected items, some rags that might fetch a halfpenny, a piece of metal that could be worth something to the right buyer, and embarrassingly, a small bag of relatively fresh horse manure that Jack insists is good quality. Not bad for your first day, Jack appraises. Now we sell it. The Rag and Bone shop is a dark, cluttered space that smells even worse than the streets. The owner, a corpulent man with fingers like sausages, barely glances at your findings. 3 farthings for the lot, he grunts. 3 farthings, Jack protests. Come on, Morris. The metal alone is worth a penny. 3 farthings. Take it or leave it. Jack sighs. We'll take it. Outside, Jack divides the money. There you go, your share, almost a halfpenny. Keep it all day, you might earn your sit-up again. You stare at the pitiful coin in your palm. All that work for less than half a penny. This is impossible, you mutter. Welcome to London, Jack says, without sympathy. Better get back to it if you want a roof tonight. The afternoon passes in much the same way. You search, you scavenge. You occasionally find something worth a farthing. The work is exhausting, demeaning, and barely productive. By late afternoon, you've earned just over a penny. Jack seems impressed. Not bad for a first-timer. I've got about 2 pennies myself. Know what that means? What? A grin spreads across his weathered face. Tonight, we're upgrading. 2-penny hangover. You remember Jack mentioning this last night, the middle option between the sit-up and the coffin. What exactly is a 2-penny hangover, you ask? Jack's eyes sparkle with what passes for excitement in this bleak existence. Oh, you're in for a treat. Well, not a treat, but better than last night. As dusk approaches, your body aches from the day's scavenging. Your stomach growls again. That morning bread long since digested. But Jack seems determined to save your pennies for the shelter. Food or sleep, he explains. That's the choice most nights. Can't usually afford both. You both head toward a different shelter than last night's, this one on the edge of Spitalfields. The same desperate crowd is already gathering, but there's a slight difference. These people have 2 pennies instead of 1. In the hierarchy of Victorian homelessness, that makes them practically aristocracy. 2-penny line on the left, barks a Salvation Army worker at the door. You and Jack join the queue, which moves slowly. When you finally reach the front, you hand over your precious 2 pennies. The admission feels momentous. You've literally worked all day for this upgrade. Inside, the room looks similar to the sit-up at first glance. Wooden benches in rows. Oil lamps casting weak light. Same smell of unwashed humanity. But there's one crucial difference. Running across the front of each bench, at about chest height, is a thick rope. That, Jack announces proudly, is what we pay extra for. You must look confused because he laughs. The rope, mate. That's your pillow for the night. You lean over it, see? Lets you actually sleep without falling over. It takes a moment for this to sink in. People are paying extra for the privilege of leaning forward over a rope to sleep. That's the upgrade. That's what 2 pennies buys. Find a spot, Jack advises. Ends of the rows fill up first. Nobody wants to be in the middle, too crowded. You manage to claim spots at the end of a bench. Around you, the room fills quickly. Men and women of all ages, though mostly older. Unlike the sit-up, children are rare here. Few families can afford the extra penny per person. A woman settles on the bench across from you. She's perhaps 50, though hard living makes it difficult to tell. Her face is a map of wrinkles, her hands red and raw from what must be laundry work. "First time at the hangover?" she asks, noticing your bewildered expression. You nod. "You'll get used to it." She positions herself against the rope. "Try to get your chest right over it. Distributes the weight better." You follow her advice, leaning forward until the rope presses against your sternum. It's uncomfortable, but oddly stable. With your weight balanced over the rope, you might actually be able to sleep without toppling over. "Name's Ginny," the woman offers. "You're not from London," you observe, noting her accent. "Came from Manchester 10 years ago. Factory closed. Thought London would have more work." She snorts. "Biggest mistake of my life." Jack leans in. Ginny's the queen of the hangover, been doing this longer than anyone. 8 years in the 2 penny, she confirms with a strange pride. Never had to go back to the sit-up, never quite made it to the coffin either. "The coffin's overrated," Jack says. "Too crowded. Bugs are worse." Bugs? You suddenly become very aware of the itching sensation that's been building all day. Ginny laughs. "Oh, love, you've already got them. Everyone does. The lice are the least of your worries." You try not to think about what's crawling through your hair and clothes. Focus instead on the bizarre sleeping arrangement you're about to experience. Around the room, people are settling in. Some talk quietly. Others stare blankly ahead, already half asleep. A Salvation Army officer walks through the rows, Bible in hand, but doesn't stop for a sermon this time. "Another blessing of the 2 penny, Jack whispers. "They don't preach as much. Figure we've paid more, so we deserve less lecture." As the evening deepens, the room grows quieter. Despite the discomfort of the rope pressing against your chest, exhaustion begins to pull at you. Your head grows heavy, your eyes flutter closed, and amazingly, you sleep. It's not good sleep. It's not restful sleep. It's the sleep of absolute exhaustion, your body suspended awkwardly over a rope. But it's sleep, something you didn't get at all in the penny sit-up. Throughout the night, you drift in and out of consciousness. Someone nearby snores like a broken steam engine. Someone else sobs quietly. The rope digs painfully into your chest, and your back screams in protest at the unnatural position. But compared to last night, it's almost luxury. Until morning comes. At precisely 5 a.m., a commotion wakes you. Before you can fully understand what's happening, the rope suddenly goes slack. You and everyone else on your bench tumble forward, a tangle of limbs and curses. What the hell? You sputter, now fully awake and on the floor. Jack laughs, picking himself up. That's why they call it the hangover. They cut the rope to wake us up. Works every time. Around the room, people are groaning and pulling themselves up from the floor. Some laugh at the daily indignity. Others curse the Salvation Army workers who are now moving through the room, urging everyone out. Rise and shine, calls one worker with sadistic cheerfulness. God's given you another day. God can keep it, mutters Ginny, rubbing her shoulder where she landed. You stand, feeling new pains on top of yesterday's. Your chest has a perfect rope-shaped welt across it. Your back feels twisted, but strangely, you do feel somewhat better than yesterday. The 2-penny difference between sleeping and not sleeping. Outside, dawn is breaking through London's perpetual smog. Another day of scavenging awaits. Worth the extra penny? Jack asks. You consider the question. I think so. Good man, you're learning. He claps you on the shoulder. Now, there's a church on Commercial Street that does porridge if we hurry. As you follow Jack through the awakening streets, you pass a man sleeping in a doorway, or at least you think he's sleeping. The bluish tinge to his skin suggests otherwise. No one stops to check. Death on London's streets was so common that it barely warranted a glance. Couldn't get his pennies yesterday, Jack says quietly, nodding toward the man. There but for the grace of God, eh? And that was the razor's edge that London's homeless walked daily, each penny literally a matter of life and death, each night a struggle to find enough shelter to see another dawn. The 2-penny hangover was marginally better than the penny sit-up, but only in the most technical sense. You still spent the night essentially vertical. You still woke to a rude awakening. You still started each day exhausted, hungry, and with nothing to your name except the clothes on your back. But at least with the hangover, you got some sleep. And in the brutal calculus of Victorian homelessness, that small mercy made all the difference. Ginny falls into step beside you. First time I used the hangover, she says conversationally, I thought it was the most degrading thing I'd ever experienced. Sleeping over a rope like an animal. She laughs bitterly. Shows what I knew. There are far worse ways to spend a night in London. Like what? You ask, immediately regretting the question. Her eyes darken. Like the flash houses down in the rookeries, like the opium dens, like the places where they'll give you a bed for free if you're a young girl. She spits on the ground. The hangover's a bloody palace compared to some options. You walk in silence for a while, digesting this. The hierarchy of Victorian poverty was complex and brutal. There were always lower depths to sink to. You know what keeps me going, Ginny says suddenly. The thought that someday I might save up 4 pennies, get myself into a coffin for a night, sleep lying flat like a proper human being. She smiles, revealing several missing teeth. That's my dream. Pathetic. Isn't it, dreaming of a wooden box to sleep in? But it wasn't pathetic. In a world where simply lying down to sleep had become a luxury, dreaming of a wooden coffin-shaped bed was perfectly rational. And that, my friend, was the two-penny hangover, the middle option in Victorian London's homeless shelters. A rope to sleep against, a jarring awakening, a night slightly less miserable than the absolute worst. As you listen from the comfort of your bed, think about the last time you complained about your mattress being too soft or too firm. Think about the luxury of lying flat, of having multiple pillows, of being able to turn over in the night. These simple comforts would have seemed like unimaginable luxury to Ginny, Jack, and thousands like them, balancing precariously over ropes in the two-penny shelters of Victorian London. Next, we'll see what life was like for those who could afford the relative luxury of the four-penny coffin and discover whether sleeping in a box that resembled your final resting place was really the upgrade everyone dreamed it would be. But for now, feel the softness of your mattress beneath you, the gentle embrace of your blankets, the perfect support of your pillow, and be grateful that your sleep doesn't depend on a rope stretched across a bench in a crowded room, a rope that will be cut come morning, sending you tumbling into another day of desperate survival. Porridge at the church mission turns out to be a generous description. It's more like warm grey water with a few oats floating sadly on top. But it's hot, and that matters because summer is giving way to autumn in London. The mornings carry a chill that seeps into your bones. "Winter's coming," Jack says grimly, slurping his porridge. "You can feel it." Ginny nods. First-timers on the street never make it through their first winter, not without help. "Is it that bad?" you ask. They exchange a look that makes your stomach tighten. "Let me put it this way," Jack says. "Last winter I counted 17 people I knew who didn't see spring. Froze in doorways, drowned in the Thames. Coughing sickness took the rest." You're about to respond when a commotion erupts near the serving table. A man has collapsed, his bowl of porridge splattering across the floor. His body convulses, foam flecking his lips. "Falling sickness," Ginny mutters, not even looking up. "Poor devil." Two church workers drag the man outside, leaving him on the pavement. No doctor is called, no help offered. He's just another of London's discarded humanity, left to either recover or die on his own. "They won't let him back in," Jack explains. "Might scare off the donors if they see the real state of us." And that was the truth of Victorian charity. It extended only as far as propriety allowed. The moment illness struck, the already tenuous safety net disappeared entirely. After breakfast, your small group parts ways. Jack heads toward the docks to look for work. Ginny goes to a laundry where she sometimes gets day labour. You're left on your own, with less than a penny to your name and a full day ahead of finding enough for tonight's shelter. The streets feel different today. Rain threatens, heavy clouds hanging low over the city. Your clothes, never quite dry from yesterday, cling uncomfortably to your skin. Your shoes, more whole than leather now, squelch with each step. By midday, the rain arrives, not the dramatic downpour that might drive people to shelter, but the persistent, miserable drizzle that London specialises in. It's the kind of rain that seems harmless until you've been in it for hours. Then you realise you're soaked to the skin, chilled to the bone. You've managed to earn a few farthings collecting bottles and selling them to a rag shop. Not enough for shelter yet. The pressure builds with each passing hour. A hacking cough catches your attention. Down an alley, a woman sits huddled against a wall, each cough shaking her thin frame. Blood spatters the cobblestones in front of her. Consumption, tuberculosis, the disease that killed more Londoners than any other. You hesitate, then walk on. There's nothing you can do for her, nothing anyone will do. The hospitals won't take her kind, no money, no fixed address. Workhouse infirmaries are overcrowded death traps, so she'll sit there coughing her lungs out onto London's streets until she doesn't anymore. That's when it hits you. The most terrifying aspect of homelessness in Victorian London isn't the daily struggle for pennies or the degrading sleeping arrangements. It's how easily you become invisible, how quickly society decides you're no longer worth saving. "You look lost," says a voice behind you. You turn to find a well-dressed man eyeing you with what might be concern or might be contempt. "Just looking for work," you reply cautiously. "Strong back. Can you lift?" You nod, hope flaring. "Come with me then. 2 shillings for the day." 2 shillings. That's 24 pennies. Enough for a week of hangovers or 6 nights in a coffin. It seems too good to be true. And of course, it is. The job turns out to be loading mysterious crates onto a cart in a back alley, clearly something illegal. Smuggled goods, stolen property. You don't ask and the man doesn't tell. When the work is done, instead of 2 shillings, he hands you 6pence. "That's not what you promised," you protest. His expression darkens. "It's 6pence more than you had. Take it or leave it." A knife appears in his hand, ending the negotiation. You take the 6pence, 6 pennies, still the most money you've had at once since arriving on the streets. Enough for 3 nights in a hangover, or 1 night in a coffin with enough left for food. As evening approaches, you find yourself at a crossroads, literally and figuratively. One road leads back to the 2-penny hangover, the familiar discomfort, the other toward the 4-penny coffin you've heard so much about. First time, you turn to see a boy, maybe 12 years old, with eyes far older than his face. "What? In the coffin? I can tell you're thinking about it." He grins, revealing gaps where teeth should be. "I work there sometimes. Sweep up." "Is it worth the extra pennies?" you ask. The boy shrugs. "Depends what you want. It's lying down in it, like a real bed, except it ain't." "What's your name?" "Billy." "You heading there now?" You weigh the 6pence in your palm. The sensible thing would be to stretch it out. 3 nights of hangover. But after 2 nights of sitting up or leaning over a rope, the thought of lying flat pulls at you with surprising force. "Yeah," you decide, "I am." Billy falls into step beside you. "I'll show you the way. Best to get there early. Fills up quick, especially when the weather turns." The sky has darkened, both with approaching evening and thickening clouds. The temperature drops noticeably. Your damp clothes cling to you, stealing body heat with each gust of wind. "Going to be a bad one tonight," Billy observes. "Might even snow early this year." "How long have you been on the streets?" you ask. "Born here," he replies matter-of-factly. "Never known nothing else. Me mum died when I was 7. Been looking after myself since." You try to imagine it, a 7-year-old alone in London's brutal streets. It seems impossible anyone could survive that. Yet here he walks beside you, a living testament to human resilience, or perhaps just blind luck. "There it is," Billy announces, pointing to a large, grim building. Unlike the church missions that house the sit-ups and hangovers, this looks purpose-built. A sign identifies it as a Salvation Army men's shelter. A queue has already formed despite the early hour. Men of all ages. Some women, too, though fewer than at the other shelters. These people have 4 pennies. They're the aristocracy of London's homeless. They give you tea and bread too, Billy informs you. Part of the 4 pennies. You join the queue, stomach growling at the mention of food. Despite your breakfast porridge, you're ravenous. Constant cold and movement burns calories you can't replace. As you wait, the wind picks up. Rain mixes with sleet. People huddle deeper into whatever passes for coats, sharing body heat in the queue. There's less talking here than at the hangover. These people have clawed their way up to the four-penny shelter. They're not risking their spot by causing trouble. When you finally reach the front, you proudly place 4 pennies on the counter. The Salvation Army worker nods approvingly, as if your ability to produce 4 copper coins somehow makes you morally superior to those with only 1 or 2. Name? He asks. This is new. The other shelters didn't care who you were. You give your name. First time in the coffins? You nod. Rules are simple. No drinking, no fighting, no stealing. You get a coffin, a cup of tea, and bread. Out by 6 tomorrow. Break any rules, you're blacklisted. Inside, the difference from the other shelters is immediately apparent. The main hall has tables and benches where people sit drinking tea and eating bread. An actual meal of sorts. The air still smells of unwashed bodies and damp wool, but there's an underlying scent of soap. Someone has made an effort at cleanliness. You collect your tea and bread, finding a spot at a crowded table. The tea is hot and sweet, the bread fresher than you've had in days. It's still poor fare by any normal standard, but compared to what you've experienced lately, it's a feast. Coffin veteran? Asks the man beside you, a gaunt fellow with a sailor's weathered face. First time, you admit. He nods. Thought so. You've got that look. Like you can't believe you made it to 4 pennies. He extends a calloused hand. Name's Thomas. 20 years at sea, now washed up here. Quite literally. You shake his hand, introducing yourself. Word of advice? Thomas says, leaning closer. Check your coffin before you settle in. Sometimes they don't clean them properly between guests, if you catch my meaning. Your appetite diminishes slightly at the implication. Off to the meal, another Salvation Army worker appears at the front of the room. Coffin room's open, orderly line, gentlemen. The room empties quickly, everyone eager to claim their box for the night. You follow the crowd down a corridor and into a large, open room lined with rows of wooden boxes on the floor. And here they are, the famous 4-penny coffins. Despite the name, they don't precisely resemble burial coffins. They're rectangular wooden boxes, about 6 feet long and 2 feet wide, lined up in neat rows across the floor. Each contains a thin mattress stuffed with straw and covered with a tarpaulin sheet. No pillow, no blanket. Choose a coffin and settle in, instructs the worker. Lights out in 30 minutes. People move quickly to claim boxes, some clearly having favourites or preferred locations. You hesitate, overwhelmed by the sight of so many grown adults climbing into wooden boxes like oversized children playing a macabre game. Thomas appears at your elbow. Back corner ones are best, he advises. Further from the door, less draft, and away from the snorers. You follow his advice, making your way to a back corner. The box looks startlingly small for an adult body. Following Thomas's advice, you inspect it carefully, checking for stains or signs that it hasn't been properly cleaned. It seems passable, worn but not filthy. Gingerly, you lower yourself into the box. The mattress is thin, the wooden sides press against your shoulders, and the tarpaulin sheet crinkles beneath you, but you're lying flat, actually horizontal. After 2 nights of sitting or hanging over a rope, it feels like unimaginable luxury. Worth the 4 pennies, eh? Thomas says from the neighbouring coffin. God, yes, you breathe, feeling your spine decompress for the first time in days. Around you, men settle into their boxes. Some immediately close their eyes, desperate for sleep. Others chat quietly with neighbours. A few sit up, looking around warily, hands clutched protectively around their meagre possessions. Trust is a luxury few can afford here. First time I slept in one of these, Thomas says, I thought it was the most degrading thing I'd ever experienced. Grown man sleeping in a box like an animal. He chuckles darkly. Shows what I knew. Now it feels like the Savoy Hotel compared to the alternatives. As you lie there, you notice something moving in the seam of the tarpaulin sheet, then another movement along the wooden edge of the box. Your skin begins to crawl, literally and figuratively. Bugs, Thomas confirms, noticing your discomfort. Can't escape 'em. The coffins are actually worse for bugs than the hangover. Wood gives them places to hide. Sure enough, as your eyes adjust to the dim light, you can see them. Bedbugs, lice, fleas, a veritable ecosystem of parasites that have made these coffins their home. They're feasting on you already, tiny pinpricks of pain as they bite. But exhaustion outweighs disgust. After days of little to no sleep, your body demands rest, bugs or no bugs. Your eyes grow heavy despite the discomfort. Just as you're drifting off, a racking cough erupts from a coffin across the room. Another joins it, then another. The symphony of illness surrounds you: consumption, bronchitis, influenza, the invisible killers that stalk London's poor. Coffin cough, Thomas murmurs. Gets worse in winter. Half these poor bastards won't make it to spring. You think of the sixpence in your pocket. Enough for one more night here, if you're careful. But what then? Winter is coming, as Jack warned. How will you survive when the real cold hits? When snow blankets the city and the Thames freezes over? When even the most meagre work dries up and charity stretches thinner than ever? Been on the streets long? Thomas asks. Oh, not long, you reply. You? 3 years now, since my ship went down off Margate. Lost my papers, couldn't prove my experience. No captain will take on a sailor without papers. He sighs. Never thought I'd end up here. Had a wife once, house in Limehouse, all gone now. That was the common thread among London's homeless, the razor-thin line between stability and destitution. One misfortune, one illness, one lost job, and the slide began. Once you fell, climbing back up was nearly impossible. The oil lamps are extinguished, plunging the room into darkness broken only by moonlight filtering through high windows. The coughing continues. Someone sobs quietly in a distant corner. Despite it all, sleep comes for you, the deep, exhausted sleep of someone horizontal for the first time in days, until the screaming starts. You jolt awake to chaos. A man thrashes in his coffin, shrieking about fire and water, night terrors, or perhaps delirium tremens, the withdrawal that tormented alcoholics when they couldn't afford gin. Salvation Army workers rush in, dragging the man out as he continues to scream. The room settles slowly, everyone on edge. This is far from uncommon. Navy man, Thomas whispers, gets the horrors sometimes, thinks he's back on a burning ship. Sleep comes again, fitfully. You wake several times, from the cold, from the bugs, from the coughing that never quite stops. But compared to the sit-up, or even the hangover, it's paradise. You're lying down, your body can actually rest. Morning comes too soon. At precisely 6, a bell rings and the room stirs to life. Men climb stiffly from their coffins, joints cracking, bodies protesting. Up and out, calls a worker. Breakfast in the main hall, then clear out. Breakfast is the same as dinner, tea and bread, but hot food twice in 12 hours feels like unimaginable bounty. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, knowing it might be your last meal of the day. Thomas joins you, his face grey with exhaustion despite the night's rest. "What's your plan?" he asks. "Find work," you reply. "Try to get another 4 pennies for tonight." He nods. "Good luck with that. Day like today, everyone's competing for the same pennies." Outside, your heart sinks. Snow falls steadily, covering London in a deceptive blanket of white that will soon turn to grey-brown slush. The temperature has plummeted overnight. Your breath forms clouds in the frigid air. Winter has arrived early, just as Billy predicted, and with it, the deadliest season for London's homeless. You clutch your remaining 2 pennies, already feeling the cold seeping through your inadequate clothing. Enough for a hangover tonight if you can't earn more. But what about tomorrow night and the night after? As you stand there pondering your diminishing options, you spot Jack trudging through the snow, head down against the wind. He looks up, sees you, and changes course. "Survived the coffin, did you?" he asks with a grin. "Feeling like royalty now?" Despite everything, you smile. It was actually worth it. Course it was. Lying flat like a proper human, he stamps his feet against the cold. But winter's here now. Game changes. How? His expression grows serious. Cold kills faster than hunger. Seen men freeze to death sitting up in the penny sit-up when it gets cold enough. Warm shelter matters more than anything now. Looking around, you see London transformed by snow, not into the Christmas card image of charming white-capped buildings, but into a killing field. Every surface covered in freezing dampness, every breath painful in your lungs, every moment outdoors drawing heat from your body that you cannot replace. "What do we do?" you ask. Jack sighs. "What we always do. Survive another day, find another penny, and pray that someone somewhere gives a damn about people like us." But in Victorian London, that prayer went largely unanswered. For every philanthropist like William Booth of the Salvation Army, there were thousands who turned blind eyes to the suffering on their doorsteps. For every shelter, inadequate as they were, there were countless who believed poverty was a moral failing rather than a social tragedy. And so you follow Jack into the snowy streets, another day of desperate survival ahead. The 4-penny coffin already seems like a distant luxury as you confront the brutal reality of winter. As you huddle under your warm blankets in your temperature-controlled room with your perfectly supportive mattress, think of those wooden boxes lined up on cold floors. Think of grown men and women grateful for the privilege of sleeping in something resembling their final resting place. Think of how easily any of us could find ourselves there, but for the grace of circumstance and time. Next, we'll see how London's homeless faced the deadly challenge of winter and how the workhouse, that most dreaded of Victorian institutions, sometimes became the only alternative to a frozen death on the streets. But for now, appreciate the simple miracle of your bed, the luxury of warmth, the privilege of safety. These were dreams beyond reaching for those called the 4-penny coffins home, night after cold Victorian night. Snow blankets, London, transforming the city into something from a Christmas card, if you're viewing it from a warm parlour with a roaring fire. From the streets, it's a different story. The beautiful white powder quickly turns to grey slush, seeping into your already damp shoes. The wind cuts through your inadequate clothing like it's not there at all. Your fingers and toes have gone from painful to worryingly numb. "Can't feel my feet," Jack mutters as you both huddle in a doorway, trying to escape the worst of the wind. Bad sign that. You've been on the streets for hours, trying to earn enough for shelter tonight. The snow has made everything harder. Few people venture out, meaning fewer opportunities to scavenge or beg. Those who do hurry past with heads down, clutching their coats tightly around them, ignoring the outstretched hands of the desperate. By mid-afternoon, you've earned just a single penny between you, nowhere near enough. "We're in trouble," Jack says, stating the obvious. His lips have taken on a bluish tinge that alarms you. "Got to make a choice soon." "What choice?" He looks at you grimly. "Workhouse or freeze? That's winter for you?" The workhouse. Even the word sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the snow. You've heard the stories, everyone has. The deliberate humiliation, the back-breaking labor, the separation of families, the food barely fit for animals. Isn't there another option? You ask. Jack shakes his head. Not in weather like this, not unless you've got pennies I don't know about. A woman hurries past, dropping a half-eaten meat pie into a snowbank as she goes. Jack lunges for it like a man possessed, brushing off the snow and dividing it with shaking hands. You both devour your portions in seconds, the first real food you've had all day. That's the problem with being poor in London, Jack says, licking grease from his fingers. It's not just that you've got no money, it's that being poor costs more than being rich. What do you mean? Rich folk buy coal by the ton, get the best price. We buy it by the scuttle, pay 4 times as much. They buy good clothes that last years. We buy cheap shit that falls apart in weeks. Everything costs more when you've got less. He spits into the snow. It's like the whole system's designed to keep us down. He wasn't wrong. Victorian London's economy was built on exploitation of the working classes, of women, of children, of anyone vulnerable. The rich got richer precisely because the poor stayed poor. As afternoon fades to evening, the temperature plummets further. Your shared doorway offers minimal protection from the elements. Already your joints are stiffening from cold, your body's desperate attempt to preserve core heat. We need to decide, Jack says, voice weak, workhouse or... He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. Death from exposure was common in winter. Bodies found frozen in doorways, under bridges, in alleyways. The newspapers barely mentioned it. Just another tally of London's unfortunates who hadn't survived the season. I've never been, you admit, to a workhouse. Jack's laugh is hollow. Count yourself lucky. Been twice myself. Swore never again, but... He gestures at the snow, still falling heavily. Beggars can't be choosers, eh? The decision made, you both struggle to your feet, limbs protesting after hours of inactivity in the cold. The nearest workhouse is in Whitechapel, a massive brick building that looms over the neighbourhood like a fortress or a prison. By the time you reach it, darkness has fallen completely. A queue has already formed outside the entrance. Men, women, and children, all hollow-eyed and shivering, driven to this last resort by the killing cold. Remember, Jack murmurs as you join the line. Once you're in, you're under their control. Do what they say. Don't argue, don't complain, just keep your head down and get through it. The queue inches forward painfully slowly. A woman ahead of you clutches a small child to her chest. The little one's cough, a wet, ominous sound in the frigid air. Will they separate them? You ask Jack, nodding toward the mother and child. His expression answers before his words do. Course they will. Men, women, children, all go to different wards. Might not see each other the whole time they're in. The woman must overhear because she clutches her child tighter, tears freezing on her cheeks. Just for tonight, she whispers to the little one, just till the snow stops. When you finally reach the front of the line, you're met by a porter with a face like a closed fist. He regards you and Jack with undisguised contempt. Names? He barks. You give them. Residence? Jack gestures vaguely. Streets. The porter sneers. Vagrants. Through there. You'll be processed. Processing turns out to be a clinical, dehumanizing experience. First, your clothes, filthy, vermin-infested, but yours, are taken away for disinfection. You're herded naked into a communal bath of tepid water, already grey from previous users. A harsh lye soap burns your skin as you scrub away weeks of grime under the watchful eye of a workhouse official. Mr. Spot, he says, pointing with his cane to your back. Scrub harder or you'll bring the bugs in. The humiliation is deliberate. Everything about the workhouse is designed to make you feel less than human, to punish you for the crime of being poor. After the bath, you're given the workhouse uniform, coarse, ill-fitting garments that scratch your skin and hang loosely on your malnourished frame. The shirt is stamped with the workhouse mark, branding you as a pauper for all to see. Men's casual ward, end of the corridor, the official directs. You'll get gruel at 6, work begins at 5 tomorrow morning. The men's casual ward is a long, narrow room with beds lined up against both walls. Not proper beds, but wooden platforms with thin straw mattresses. Still, after nights in sit-ups, hangovers, and even coffins, they look almost inviting. Almost. Because the ward is also teeming with humanity at its most desperate. Men coughing, moaning, some muttering to themselves, the air thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, disease and despair. Despite the disinfection, lice and fleas still jump freely between bodies. Better than freezing to death, Jack says, claiming 2 adjacent beds, but not by much. Gruel arrives at 6, a thin porridge that tastes of nothing but has the virtue of being hot. You devour it, licking the bowl clean. Around you, men do the same, some practically growling over their food like animals. Hunger reduces everyone to the same base instincts. Night falls early in winter, and with it comes an enforced silence. The workhouse master makes his rounds, striking his cane against the floor. Lights out, no talking. Anyone caught breaking the rules spends tomorrow in the stone yard, regardless of weather. The lights, meagre oil lamps, are extinguished, plunging the ward into darkness broken only by moonlight through high windows. Despite the crowding, despite the lice, despite everything, exhaustion and relative warmth combine to pull you towards sleep, until screaming starts. A man 3 beds down shoots upright, shrieking about demons and fire. Immediately 2 workhouse guards appear, dragging him bodily from the ward as he continues to scream. "Where are they taking him?" you whisper to Jack. "Isolation cell. They'll leave him there till morning, maybe longer." "But he's obviously ill. Shouldn't they—" Jack cuts you off with a bitter laugh. "Ill? Course he's ill. We're all ill in some way. Doesn't matter to them. You're not a person here. You're a problem to be managed." The night passes fitfully, the relative comfort of lying flat offset by the constant coughing, moaning and occasional crying around you. No one is allowed to rise, not even to use the single chamber pot at the end of the ward. Many soil themselves rather than risk the guards' wrath. Morning arrives with brutal efficiency, a clanging bell at 4:30 a.m. jolting everyone awake. Guards move through the ward, striking those slow to rise with wooden batons. Up work detail in 30 minutes. Anyone not ready gets no breakfast. Breakfast is the same gruel as dinner, this time stone cold. You force it down knowing you'll need the energy for whatever labour awaits. The men's work detail is divided, some to the kitchens, some to laundry, some to cleaning, but most, including you and Jack, are sent to the stone yard. Casual ward gets the worst jobs, Jack explains as you're herded outside. They want to make sure we don't get too comfortable, might decide to stay. The stone yard is exactly what it sounds like, an open courtyard where large stones are broken into smaller ones by hand. The broken stones are used for road building. It's mindless, back-breaking labour designed not for efficiency but for punishment. You're each given a hammer and led to a pile of rocks. Snow still covers the ground, the temperature well below freezing. 16 stone per man, announces the yard boss. No one leaves until their quota is met. For the next 6 hours, you break stones. The cold metal hammer blisters your hands. The stone chips fly, cutting your face and arms. Your back screams in protest. Your empty stomach cramps. But you keep going because the alternative is a night back on the freezing streets. Around midday, a woman's piercing wail cuts through the monotonous sound of hammers on stone. It comes from the workhouse infirmary, a sound of such primal grief that it stops even the guards in their tracks. "Another one gone," mutters the man working next to you, an elderly fellow with hands like gnarled tree roots. "Fever's going through the women's ward, something terrible." "Who was it?" someone asks. The old man shrugs. "Does it matter? One less mouth for them to feed." That was the reality of workhouse death. Unremarkable, expected, often unmourned except by the immediately affected, bodies buried in unmarked paupers' graves, sometimes multiple to a plot to save space, names recorded in ledgers, then forgotten. You look at Jack, alarmed to see how grey his face has become. He sways slightly as he swings his hammer. "You all right?" you ask. He nods weakly. "Just hungry and cold. I'll manage." But you're not convinced. Jack has been on the streets far longer than you, his body already weakened by years of malnutrition and exposure. The workhouse labour might be the final straw. By late afternoon, when the wind sun is already setting, you've both met your quotas. Jack has had to stop several times, wheezing and coughing. You've covered for him when the guards weren't looking, breaking some of his stones alongside your own. Dinner is marginally better than breakfast and lunch, a thin stew with actual vegetables visible if you look hard enough. Jack barely touches his, a worrying sign. "Should eat," you urge. "Keep your strength up." He tries, managing a few spoonfuls before pushing the bowl away. "Can't, stomach's not right." In the ward that night, Jack's cough worsens. Each hack seems to come from deeper in his chest, a wet, rattling sound that draws irritated glares from nearby men trying to sleep. By morning, he can't rise for the bell. "Get up, you lazy sod," a guard shouts, raising his baton. You intercept, standing between them. "He's ill, needs the infirmary." The guard's face darkens. "Are you telling me my job, pauper?" You swallow hard. "No, sir, just he's really sick. Please." For a moment you think the guard will strike you both. Then, unexpectedly, he sighs. "Infirmary's overcrowded as it is, but fine. Can't have him dying in the ward. Bad for morale." Two workhouse attendants carry Jack away on a stretcher. You're not allowed to accompany him. Workhouse rules keep the wards strictly separated. As he disappears down the corridor, you wonder if you'll ever see him again. The workhouse infirmary was often just a holding area for the dying. Little actual medical care occurred. Diseases spread rapidly in the cramped conditions, turn minor illnesses into fatal ones. Your day proceeds as before, stone breaking in the bitter cold. Your hands have developed deep cracks that bleed when you grip the hammer. Your cough, milder than Jack's but persistent, draws concerned looks from the men around you. "You'll be next," the old man tells you matter-of-factly. "Once it gets in your chest, that's it." That night, you inquire about Jack, the wardmaster consulting his ledger with obvious disinterest. "Typhus, most like," he says. "Infirmary's full of it. Doubt he'll last the week." Your stomach drops. Typhus, the workhouse fever, killed thousands every winter. Spread by the same lice that infested the casual wards, it was virtually a death sentence in these conditions. "Can I see him?" The wardmaster laughs. "This isn't a hospital, boy. It's a workhouse. You want visiting hours? Go to Guy or Bart's." He looks up from his ledger with cold eyes. Not that they'd take him either, or you. London's hospitals rarely admitted the truly destitute. Those without funds or references were turned away to die in the streets or in workhouse infirmaries like this one. Another day passes, then another. The work, the meagre food, the fitful sleep in a ward full of misery. You ask about Jack daily, receiving increasingly impatient responses. On the fourth day, the ward master finally snaps. He's dead. Yesterday morning, buried already. Now stop asking. The news hits like a physical blow. Jack, who survived years on London's merciless streets, who showed you the ropes, who shared his meagre findings with you, gone, another nameless pauper in an unmarked grave. That night, staring at the ceiling of the casual ward, you make a decision. Despite the continuing snow, despite the killing cold, you can't stay here. The workhouse isn't saving lives, it's just collecting the dying in one convenient location. At dawn, instead of reporting for work detail, you slip away during the morning chaos. Your workhouse uniform marks you as a pauper, but it's better than nakedness in this weather. Your original clothes are gone, probably burned as too infested to save. Outside, London is buried under more snow. The temperature feels even lower than before, but somehow the icy air tastes like freedom after the miasma of the workhouse. You have nothing now, no money, no shelter, no Jack to guide you, just the clothes on your back and the knowledge that surviving winter on the streets will take more luck than skill. As you trudge through the snow, uncertain where to go, you pass a Salvation Army shelter, a penny sit-up that once seemed like the depth of misery. Now, after the workhouse, it looks almost welcoming. A Salvation Army officer stands outside, offering tickets for free soup to those willing to attend a prayer service. You accept gratefully, the paper ticket a flimsy lifeline in a drowning world. Inside, the prayer hall is packed with London's desperate, drawn by the promise of free food and momentary warmth. You find a space on a bench, body still aching from days of breaking stones. "Looks like you've been to the Spike," observes the man beside you, using the street name for the workhouse casual ward. You nod. "Bad this time of year?" he continues. "Fever going through all of them. You're lucky to be out." "My friend wasn't so lucky," you reply. He nods, understanding immediately. "Lost my brother same way last winter. It's how they manage the poor, innit? Let nature thin us out when there's too many to feed." The cynicism is shocking but not inaccurate. Victorian London's approach to poverty wasn't to solve it but to manage it, to keep it just contained enough to prevent riots, but never actually address the root causes. The Salvation Army officer begins his sermon, a passionate plea for sobriety and godliness. Around you, the assembled poor listen with varying degrees of interest, most just waiting for the promised soup. And yet, for all its faults, at least the Sally Army was trying. They offered shelter, however inadequate. They provided food, however meagre. They saw London's poor as humans worth saving, not problems to be contained. When the sermon ends, you collect your cup of soup. Thin but hot, with actual pieces of vegetable and meat visible. It's the best thing you've tasted in days. "They're opening an extra sit-up tonight," announces the officer. "Due to the extreme weather, 1 penny or free if you've nothing." A murmur runs through the crowd. Free shelter is unheard of. Even in the depths of winter, London's homeless were expected to pay for the privilege of not freezing to death. That night, you claim a bench in the free sit-up. It's as crowded and uncomfortable as you remember. The hard bench, the prohibition against sleeping, the monitors with their sticks. But after the workhouse, it feels almost like kindness. The woman with the coughing child is there too, both looking thinner than when you saw them enter the workhouse. You catch her eye, a moment of shared understanding passing between you. You both tried the workhouse. You both chose the streets instead, even in winter. Because sometimes freedom, even cold, hungry freedom, is preferable to the soul-crushing control of the Victorian poor relief system. As you sit on that hard bench, fighting sleep that would bring the monitor's stick down on your shoulder, you realize something. Jack was right. The whole system was designed to keep you down. The sit-ups, the hangovers, the coffins, the workhouse, all of them just different circles in London's poverty hell. None were meant to help you escape poverty. They were meant to manage you while you remained poor, to keep you alive barely while ensuring you stayed in your place. As you listen from the comfort of your warm bed, think about what it means to have options, to have agency, to not be at the mercy of systems designed to control rather than uplift. The Victorian poor had none of these luxuries. They existed at the whim of those who saw poverty as a moral failing rather than a structural problem. Next, we'll see how some attempted to change this broken system and whether Victorian society was capable of seeing its poorest members as fully human. But for now, feel the freedom of your soft mattress, the dignity of your private space, the luxury of sleeping without permission. These simple rights denied to London's homeless might be the greatest privilege of all. Morning comes with brutal clarity. Your body aches from another night on the hard bench. The sit-up monitor raps his stick on the floor, startling awake anyone who managed to doze despite the rules. Everyone outdoors, reopen at 8 tonight. Outside, the world is white and silent. Snow fell heavily overnight, transforming London into something almost beautiful, if you could ignore the bone-deep cold seeping through your workhouse-issued clothes. With Jack gone, you're adrift. No guide, no friend, just another anonymous face in London's sea of desperate humanity. "First winter?" asks a voice beside you. You turn to find the woman with the coughing child, both bundled in threadbare shawls. The child looks marginally better than before, though still alarmingly thin. "On the streets, yes," you reply. She nods. "Thought so. You've got that look, like you can't believe this is happening to you." She shifts her child to her other hip. "I'm Ellen. This is Maggie." She looks better. Ellen's face softens. The mission doctor gave her something for the cough. Don't know what, but it helped. She studies you. "You're alone now, aren't you? Your friend from the workhouse?" You nod, throat suddenly tight. "Come with us then," she decides. Safety in numbers, especially this time of year. And so you join Ellen and Maggie on their daily rounds, a circuit of London carefully designed to maximise charity while minimising harassment. First to a church kitchen that offers bread and tea in the mornings, then to a public pump for water, then to a sheltered alley where other women and children gather for mutual protection. "Men don't bother us much here," Ellen explains. "Too many eyes watching, and Reverend Shaw comes by most days, brings blankets sometimes." The alley is a revelation, a tiny pocket of community among London's homeless, women sharing what little they have, watching each other's children, warning of dangerous men or overzealous police. It's not safety, not really, but it's better than complete vulnerability. "How long have you been—" You trail off, unsure how to phrase it politely. "On the streets," Ellen finishes for you. 3 years now. Maggie was born in the workhouse. She strokes her daughter's hair. Her father was a good man, cabinet maker, got crushed when a stack of lumber fell. After the funeral, couldn't keep up the rent. She shrugs, the simple gesture containing volumes of grief and resignation. Her story is depressingly common. Victorian London offered precious little support for widows with children. With no husband and no family to take them in, the slide from working poor to destitute happened with terrifying speed. Around midday, a well-dressed gentleman enters the alley, accompanied by a younger man taking notes. The women straighten, suddenly alert. "It's all right," Ellen murmurs. "That's Mr. Booth. He's one of the good ones." The name means nothing to you, but the reverent way she says it suggests importance. The gentleman approaches, removing his hat despite the cold. "Good afternoon, ladies. Might I ask you a few questions?" His companion readies his pencil, watching intently. Ellen nods. "What do you want to know, Mr. Booth?" "Your current circumstances, where you sleep, what you eat, how you manage." His voice is gentle but direct. "I'm conducting a survey of London's poor. The truth must be documented if things are to change, and for the next hour that's exactly what he does. Documents." He asks questions about shelters, about workhouses, about street survival. He listens without judgment, his companion's pencil scratching constantly. "Who is he?" you ask Ellen when they move to speak with other women. "Charles Booth. He's mapping poverty in London, every street, every alley, showing the rich folk what's really happening." She says his name like he's some kind of saviour. "Been at it for years now. They say he's even gone undercover in the sit-ups and doss houses to see for himself." Charles Booth was indeed conducting one of the most comprehensive studies of poverty ever attempted. His inquiry into life and labour in London would eventually fill 17 volumes and take him 17 years to complete. His poverty maps, colour-coded to show different levels of destitution, revealed the true scale of London's crisis. Does it help, you ask, all this documenting? Ellen considers the question. Maybe not us, directly, but they say Queen Victoria herself has seen his work. Parliament too can't ignore what's put right in front of them, can they? But of course they could, and often did. Victorian society excelled at ignoring inconvenient truths about the consequences of industrialisation and unchecked capitalism. Before leaving, Booth approaches you specifically. "You're new to this life," he observes. Not a question. You nod. "Would you be willing to share your experience? The transition from employed to..." He gestures vaguely at your surroundings. "The public needs to understand how easily it can happen." There's something compelling about his earnestness. You find yourself telling him everything. Your arrival in London, meeting Jack, the progression from sit-up to hangover to coffin to workhouse, the daily struggle for pennies, Jack's death. His companion's pencil never stops moving, capturing every word. Booth listens with complete attention, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just absorbing your story. "People believe poverty is a choice," he says when you finish. "A moral failing. They must be shown otherwise." He reaches into his pocket, extracting a coin. "This is not charity, but payment for your time and expertise. Your story will help others understand." He presses a shilling into your palm. 12 pennies. Enough for 3 nights in a coffin, with change left for food. The sudden wealth is dizzying. As Booth departs, Ellen watches approvingly. "Told you, one of the good ones." Later, huddled with Ellen and Maggie in the relative shelter of a shop doorway, you share the bread your unexpected wealth has purchased. The simple act of giving rather than receiving creates a warm glow that has nothing to do with physical temperature. "There are others like him," Ellen says, breaking her bread into tiny pieces for Maggie. "People studying us, writing about us. Some just want to gawk like we're animals in a zoo, but others actually want things to change." She tells you about Henry Mayhew, whose interviews with London's poor, shocked polite society years earlier, about Lord Shaftesbury, whose factory reforms saved countless children from industrial slavery, about Dr. Barnardo rescuing homeless children from certain death on the streets. "And then there's the General," she adds with a smile. "The General?" "William Booth, no relation to Charles, runs the Salvation Army." You think of the stern-faced Salvation Army officers at the sit-ups and hangovers. They don't seem particularly revolutionary. Ellen laughs. Maybe not now, but when the general started, people thought he was mad. Preaching in the slums, feeding the destitute, letting women be officers with equal rank to men. Proper scandal, that was. William Booth had indeed revolutionized Christian outreach to the poor. His Darkest England scheme proposed comprehensive solutions to poverty, from city shelters to farm colonies, from employment bureaus to missing persons services. It wasn't perfect, but it acknowledged something radical, that the poor deserved more than punishment for their condition. As afternoon turns to evening, your thoughts turn to shelter for the night. With 12 pennies, you have options that would have seemed luxurious just yesterday. Will you go back to the sit-up? You ask Ellen. She shakes her head, taking Maggie to the women's shelter on Hanbury Street. Salvation Army runs it. Children allowed, costs twopence each, but it's clean and they don't separate us. The Hanbury Street Women's Shelter was one of the Salvation Army's better facilities, focusing particularly on mothers with children, the most vulnerable of London's homeless population. What about you? Ellen asks. Back to the coffin with your riches? You consider it. After the sit-up and workhouse, the fourpenny coffin sounds like paradise, but something holds you back. The memory of Jack coughing his life away, the knowledge that even the best homeless shelter is still a breeding ground for disease. Actually, you say slowly, I was thinking of something different. Which is how you find yourself that evening in a place you never expected to be, a model lodging house run by the Peabody Trust. At sixpence a night, it's far more expensive than the coffins or hangovers, but still within reach thanks to Booth's payment. The difference is immediately apparent. The building is purpose-built, not a repurposed warehouse. The dormitory is clean and well ventilated, with actual beds, narrow and simple but real beds with mattresses and blankets. There are washing facilities with soap and towels. The other lodgers are poor but respectable. Labourers, dock workers, street vendors. The working poor rather than the destitute. First time? Asks the clerk as you pay your sixpence. You nod, still stunned by the relative luxury. Rules are simple. No drinking, no fighting, out by 8 in the morning unless you pay for another night. Breakfast available for an extra halfpenny. The dormitory houses 30 men, each in his own narrow bed. Privacy is minimal, but after the packed floors of the sit-up, or the coffin-like boxes of the fourpenny, it feels almost decadent. Your neighbour is a stonemason named Williams, his hands permanently grey with dust, fingers gnarled from years of work. Used to have my own place, he explains over dinner, a bowl of actual stew with real meat, served in the lodging house dining room. Then the arthritis got too bad for fine work. Can only manage rough cutting now, not enough to rent rooms, but enough for here most nights. Like everyone you've met on London's margins, Williams balances perpetually on the knife edge between barely surviving and complete destitution. Better than the spikes and pennies, though, he adds, seeing your expression. Tried a coffin once, got more vermin than sleep. The model lodging houses represented a new approach to housing London's poor, the belief that decent accommodation could and should be provided at affordable rates. The Peabody Trust, the Metropolitan Association for Improving the Dwellings of the Industrious Classes, and similar organisations aimed to prove that housing the poor needn't be merely charitable, it could be sustainable. That night, lying in an actual bed with an actual blanket, you experience something that has become foreign, comfort, not luxury by any normal standard, but compared to the brutal realities of the sit-ups, hangovers and coffins, it's practically palatial. You sleep deeply for the first time in weeks, waking refreshed as sunlight streams through large windows. The sixpence was well spent, but it also highlights the fundamental cruelty of Victorian London's approach to homelessness, the vast gulf between the bare survival options of the sit-up and the basic human dignity of the model lodging house. For just a few extra pennies, a person could sleep in relative comfort and safety rather than hanging over a rope or lying in a wooden box. Yet those pennies might as well be pounds for most of London's destitute. Over breakfast, porridge with actual milk and sugar, worth every farthing. You listen to the conversations around you. These men aren't the completely broken souls of the sit-ups and coffins. They're the working poor, scraping by day to day, holding on to the bottom rung of respectability with bloodied fingernails. "Heard they're opening another Roton house in Whitechapel," says one man. "About time," replies another. "Waiting list at the Camden one is weeks long." Lord Roton's lodging houses represented the pinnacle of Victorian accommodation for working men. Private cubicles instead of open dormitories, reading rooms, dining halls, even bathing facilities. At sixpence a night, they were unattainable dreams for most of London's homeless. But they established a new standard for what housing the poor could look like. After breakfast, you step back onto London's snowy streets with renewed purpose. Your shilling will last another day or two if you're careful. After that, it's back to scavenging for pennies, but you've glimpsed another way, a system that treats the poor as humans rather than problems to be contained. The day passes in exploration rather than desperate penny hunting. Free from immediate need, you're able to see London differently. You visit Whitechapel's library, warming yourself by their fire while reading newspapers. You walk through Spitalfields Market, watching the commerce that keeps London fed. You even venture into the city proper, marvelling at the stark contrast between its wealth and the squalor just streets away. By late afternoon, you find yourself outside a building on Mile End Road with a sign identifying it as Toynbee Hall. People come and go freely, some well-dressed, others clearly working class. Curiosity draws you inside, where you discover something unexpected. A settlement house, where university graduates live and work alongside the poor, teaching classes, providing legal aid, offering medical assistance. "Can I help you?" asks a young man with spectacles and an Oxford accent. "Just looking," you reply, self-conscious of your workhouse clothes. "Well, we have a lecture on public health at 5, free to all, and soup afterward." He smiles. "You're welcome to both." The lecture hall fills with an improbable mix of people, labourers still in work clothes, middle-class reformers in neat suits, charity workers, teachers, even a few people clearly as destitute as yourself. The lecturer, a physician from London Hospital, speaks passionately about the connection between housing conditions and disease. "Tuberculosis is not a moral failing," he insists, pointing to charts showing infection rates across different neighbourhoods. "It's the direct result of overcrowding, poor ventilation, and inadequate sanitation. We cannot pray away these diseases. We must build them away." Around you, heads nod in agreement. There's something powerful happening here. A recognition that poverty isn't simply the result of personal failings, but of systemic problems requiring systemic solutions. Afterward, over surprisingly good vegetable soup, you fall into conversation with a young woman who introduces herself as a resident of Toynbee Hall. "I studied economics at Cambridge," she explains. "Now I help people navigate the poor law system, apply for assistance, find employment." "Does it work?" you ask. "All this reform?" She considers the question seriously. Sometimes. For individuals, often yes. For the system as a whole, she sighs. Change is glacially slow, but it is happening. 20 years ago, a place like this wouldn't exist. The idea of university graduates living among the poor was unthinkable. The settlement house movement represented a new approach to poverty, not just charity from afar, but direct engagement, living among the poor, understanding their challenges firsthand, working alongside them, rather than dictating solutions from comfortable drawing rooms. As evening approaches, you bid farewell to Toynbee Hall, your mind buzzing with new ideas. For the first time since arriving on London's streets, you feel something dangerous, hope, not for immediate rescue from your circumstances, but for the possibility that the system itself might eventually change. With enough for another night at the model lodging house, you return to its relative comfort, grateful for the temporary reprieve from the sit-ups and hangovers, but you know this is borrowed time. Soon enough, you'll be back to the penny-by-penny existence of London's truly destitute. Williams the stonemason is there again, his arthritis visibly worse today. Bad weather for old bones, he explains, rubbing his gnarled hands. Won't be able to work tomorrow if this keeps up. What happens then, you ask? His expression darkens, back to the spike most like, till I can earn enough for this place again. And there it was, the brutal cycle of Victorian poverty. Even those like Williams, skilled workers with decades of experience, were just one bad day away from the workhouse or the penny sit-up. That night, as you lie in your temporarily comfortable bed, you reflect on the vast gulf between London's approaches to homelessness, from the deliberate humiliation of the workhouse to the simple dignity of the model lodging house, from the bare survival of the sit-up to the community support of Toynbee Hall. The difference wasn't just in conditions, but in fundamental philosophy. Did the poor deserve punishment or assistance? Were they moral failures or victims of circumstance? Was poverty a personal sin or a societal problem? Victorian London hadn't fully resolved these questions. Different answers existed simultaneously. The punitive workhouse operating alongside the supportive settlement house, the degrading hangover alongside the dignified Roton house. Change was coming, but slowly, unevenly, and too late for many like Jack, too late for the woman who wailed in the workhouse infirmary, too late for the countless unnamed dead in paupers' graves across London. As you listen from your comfortable modern bed, think about how recently these debates raged. The questions Victorian reformers asked about housing, healthcare, employment, dignity still echo today. The systems they built, both punitive and supportive, shaped our modern approaches to homelessness and poverty. Next, we'll see how these competing philosophies continued to battle for London's soul, and what happened when the truly desperate were pushed beyond endurance. But for now, appreciate not just the physical comfort of your bed, but the social safety nets that exist today, imperfect as they may be. The distance between us and the Victorian poor isn't just measured in years, but in the slow, painful expansion of our circle of moral concern. Your lodging house reprieve lasts exactly 3 nights. When the last of Charles Booth's shilling is spent, you're back where you started, on London's unforgiving streets, with nothing but the clothes on your back and the gnawing knowledge that tonight's shelter depends entirely on today's earnings. The snow has stopped, but the cold remains, a bone-deep chill that never quite leaves you. Your cough has worsened, a constant companion that draws wary looks from passers-by. In Victorian London, a persistent cough meant only one thing: consumption. Whether you actually had tuberculosis or simply a winter cold was irrelevant. The mere suggestion was enough to mark you as untouchable. You've returned to scavenging, but winter makes it harder. Fewer people venture out, meaning fewer opportunities for begging. Food scraps freeze before you can find them. Even the rag and bone shops pay less, claiming winter slows their business too. By midday, you've earned barely a happening. Not even enough for a penny sit-up. The prospect of a night completely exposed to London's winter looms like a death sentence. That's when you hear the commotion, raised voices, then shouting coming from the direction of Trafalgar Square. Curiosity pulls you toward the noise, if only as a distraction from your increasingly desperate situation. The square is filled with people, hundreds, maybe thousands. Not the usual mix of London's poor, but specifically unemployed men. They carry makeshift signs, "Work not charity," and "Feed the hungry and the idle rich and the idle poor." "What's happening?" you ask a man on the edge of the crowd. "Unemployment protest," he explains, voice grim. "Too many out of work, not enough relief. People are starving." The winter of 1886-1887 had seen unprecedented unemployment in London. Economic depression combined with unusually harsh weather had left thousands without work or income. The poor law system, designed to punish rather than support, was buckling under the strain. At the center of the square, a man stands on a makeshift platform, voice bellowing over the crowd. "They tell us to go to the workhouse," he shouts, as if that solves anything, as if breaking stones for 10 hours deserves only gruel and a plank to sleep on. The crowd roars its approval. "They tell us poverty is our fault, that we're lazy, immoral. But look around you. Are these lazy men? Are these immoral women? Or are these people desperate for honest work at honest wages?" More cheers, louder this time. "The rich grow richer while we starve. Their mansions have rooms they never enter while we sleep on the streets. Their dogs eat better than our children." The atmosphere crackles with a dangerous energy. This isn't the resigned suffering you've seen in the sit-ups and workhouses. This is rage, the collective fury of people pushed too far. "This isn't just a protest," mutters the man beside you. "This is heading for a riot." He's proven right moments later when someone throws a stone at a nearby shop window. The glass shatters with a crash that momentarily silences the crowd. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupts. People surge toward the shops lining the square. More windows break. Police whistles shrill in the distance. The man on the platform tries to call for calm, but his voice is drowned by the growing pandemonium. "Best get out of here," advises your companion. "Police won't distinguish between rioters and bystanders. We'll all get the same truncheon." You follow his advice, retreating down a side street as mounted police appear at the square's edge. The thunder of hooves on cobblestones is followed by screams as they charge into the crowd, batons swinging indiscriminately. "Happens every few years," says the man, who introduces himself as Cooper. "People can only be hungry and cold for so long before they snap." The Trafalgar Square riots of the 1880s marked a turning point in how London viewed its poor. No longer could poverty be dismissed as a moral failing of individuals. When thousands riot simultaneously, systemic problems become harder to ignore. "Where are you headed?" Cooper asks as you walk briskly away from the chaos. You shrug. "Nowhere specific. Need to earn enough for shelter tonight." He studies you. "You've tried the coffins?" "Once. Before." You don't finish the sentence. "Before Jack died. Before the workhouse. Before everything got worse." "Going there myself tonight," he says. "Been saving up 4 whole pennies." He says it with an incongruous pride, as though announcing he'd purchased a country estate. "Lucky you," you reply, not bothering to hide the envy in your voice. Cooper is quiet for a moment, then reaches into his pocket. "Here," he says, pressing 2 pennies into your palm. "Not charity, payment for keeping an old man company." You stare at the coins, stunned by the unexpected generosity. "I can't take these." "Sure you can," he insists. "Been sleeping rough 3 nights now, getting too old for it. Could use someone to watch my back in the coffins. You seem decent enough." And so, for the second time, you find yourself with unexpected funds and a destination for the night. The 4-penny coffin. Your brief experience there feels like a lifetime ago, though in reality it's been less than 2 weeks. You and Cooper spend the afternoon huddled in the relative warmth of a church, listening to a sermon neither of you cares about, but accepting the hot tea offered afterward. By evening, when you head toward the coffin house on Burn Street, you're both marginally warmer and have managed to scrounge another penny each, insurance against tomorrow's needs. The queue outside the coffin house is longer than you remember, winter driving more of London's desperate to seek shelter at any price. You spot a familiar face. Billy, the boy who guided you before. "Remember me?" he asks, grinning his gap-toothed smile. "Of course. You still working here?" He nods. "Sweeping, mostly. Sometimes they let me sleep in the kitchen if it's really cold." As the line inches forward, you notice the tension among those waiting. Arguments break out over spots in line. A woman sobs quietly, clutching a few coins as though they might vanish. A man mutters obsessively about getting a proper coffin tonight, a proper one. "Been like this all winter," Billy explains. "Too many people, not enough coffins, some getting turned away even with their 4 pennies. The thought sends a chill through you that has nothing to do with the temperature. The coffin house was supposed to be the reliable option, expensive by homeless standards, but guaranteed if you had the coins. What happens if they turn you away? Cooper asks, clearly thinking the same thing. Billy shrugs. Sit up if you've got a penny. Streets if you don't. Some try the arches by the river, but that's dangerous. Criminals down there will slit your throat for your boots. When you finally reach the front of the line, the Salvation Army worker doesn't even look up as he takes your 4 pennies. Men's dormitory, through there. Tea and bread in the hall first. The relief of being admitted is palpable. You and Cooper collect your meagre meal, the same thin tea and day-old bread you remember, though it tastes like a feast after a day with almost nothing. The coffin room is exactly as you recall. Rows of wooden boxes laid out on the floor, each containing a thin straw mattress covered with a tarpaulin sheet. No pillows, no blankets, just the luxury of lying flat in a space of your own. "So these are the famous coffins," Cooper remarks, examining the nearest box critically. "Bit smaller than I imagined." "They're not so bad," you assure him, though your memories of bugs and discomfort suggest otherwise. "Better than hanging over a rope all night," Cooper chuckles. "Low bar that." You claim coffins in the same back corner Thomas had recommended during your previous stay. The memory of Thomas brings a pang. Another person encountered briefly, then lost to London's vast indifference. You wonder if he's still alive, still sleeping in these wooden boxes night after night. Or if he's joined Jack in an unmarked pauper's grave. The coffins fill quickly, the room soon crowded with men, and a few women, though they're supposed to have separate facilities, preparing for the night. The chorus of coughing is even worse than you remember. Winter's toll on already weakened lungs. As you settle into your coffin, the wooden sides pressing against your shoulders, you notice Cooper struggling to fit comfortably. "Bit tight for these old bones," he admits, shifting repeatedly, but beats the alternative. Around you, conversations murmur in the dim light, tales of the day's meagre earnings, discussions of which church offers the best breakfast, debates about whether the workhouse is worth considering as winter deepens, the mundane logistics of surviving at the very bottom of Victorian society. "Heard about the riot?" someone asks loudly. A dozen voices respond at once, everyone apparently aware of the Trafalgar Square disturbance. "Police broke heads left and right," reports a man with a fresh bruise darkening his cheek. "Arrested dozens. Rest scattered. Waste of time," declares another. "Riots never change anything, just get poor folk arrested. Better than doing nothing," argues a third. "Let them know we won't starve quietly." The debate grows heated, divisions emerging even among those who share the same desperate circumstances. Some favour direct action, riots, protests, disruption. Others advocate working within the system, supporting reformers like Booth, appealing to church charity, waiting for gradual change. "Been waiting 60 years," said an elderly man from a nearby coffin. "Still waiting, still sleeping in a box." His simple statement silences the room momentarily. The brutal truth hangs in the air. For many in this room, reform would come too late if it came at all. Cooper leans over to whisper to you, "Notice something about this place?" "What?" "No monitors. No one making sure we don't sleep. 4 pennies buys you the right to close your eyes." He's right. Unlike the sit-up with its vigilant guards ensuring no one dozed off, the coffin house allows sleep, encourages it even. For 4 times the price, you're permitted the most basic of human necessities. Progress, Cooper says dryly. As the night deepens, the coffin room grows quieter, though never completely silent. The coughing continues. Someone sobs quietly. Someone else prays in an urgent whisper. The wooden boxes creak as people shift, trying to find comfort on the thin mattresses. Sleep comes fitfully, interrupted by the same discomforts you remember. Bugs crawling along the seams of the tarpaulin, the hardness of the mattress, the constant noise of dozens of people in various states of illness and distress. Around midnight, commotion erupts at the far end of the room. A man thrashes in his coffin, gasping for breath, hands clutching at his chest. "Heart attack," diagnoses someone nearby. The Salvation Army night watchman hurries over, but it's clear there's little to be done. No doctor will come at this hour, certainly not for a homeless man in a 4-penny shelter. They carry him out, still alive but barely. His coffin is immediately filled by someone from the overflow area, the smooth efficiency speaking to how routine such events are. "Happens most nights," whispers a man in the next box. "Cold gets to the old ones. Hearts give out." "Will he survive?" you ask. The man snorts. "Doubt it. They'll take him to the infirmary, but..." He makes a cutting gesture across his throat. "Just a different place to die." You think of Jack, carried away on a stretcher, dead by morning and buried before you even knew. The anonymous, unceremonious disposal of London's poor, not even dignified with a proper death, let alone a proper funeral. Despite everything, you eventually fall into the deep sleep of exhaustion. When morning comes, announced by a clanging bell at 5:30 a.m., your body protests the return to consciousness. Every joint aches. Your cough seems worse. The thin workhouse clothes provide minimal protection against the cold. Cooper looks even worse, grey-faced and moving stiffly as he climbs from his coffin. "Not as young as I used to be," he says with forced cheerfulness. "Takes longer to get the blood flowing." Breakfast is the same tea and bread as dinner, though now the bread is a day older and the tea barely lukewarm. You eat it anyway, knowing it might be your only meal today. Outside, London is wrapped in dense fog, the kind that creeps under doors and through window frames, carrying coal smoke and river damp into every corner of the city. The type Londoners call a killer fog for how it aggravates breathing problems and carries disease. "Bad day for the lungs," Cooper observes, his own breath wheezing slightly. "Best find indoor work if possible." You part ways near Spitalfields Market, Cooper heading toward the docks where he sometimes gets day labour, you toward the rag-and-bone shops that occasionally pay for scavenging. "See you at the coffins tonight?" he asks. "If we both make our 4 pennies?" You nod, though the prospect seems unlikely. 4 pennies is a small fortune in London's winter economy. The day unfolds with the same grim struggle as all the others, hunting for anything of value, avoiding police who might move you along, seeking moments of warmth in church porches or shop doorways. By late afternoon you've earned just over 2 pennies, halfway to another night in a coffin. As dusk approaches, you find yourself near Hanbury Street, where Ellen mentioned the women's shelter. On impulse, you decide to check if she and Maggie are there, perhaps seeking temporary shelter from the killing fog. The women's entrance is separate from the men's, but a Salvation Army worker at the door is willing to inquire for you. She returns with Ellen, who looks surprised but pleased to see you. "Thought you might have gone back to the workhouse," she says. "Or worse." "Not yet," you reply. "How's Maggie?" Ellen's expression clouds, coughs worse. "The fog." She doesn't finish, but she doesn't need to. London's fogs were notorious killers of the young and vulnerable. "What about you? Still at the coffins?" You explain your current situation, 2 pennies earned, too short of another night in a box. Ellen nods, understanding. The whole system's designed to keep us scrambling, isn't it? Never quite enough to get ahead, just enough to stay alive and keep hoping. Her insight strikes you as profound, the deliberate precarity of Victorian poverty. Not so little that you die outright, but never enough to escape. Just the continuous grinding struggle to earn your next few pennies, your next meal, your next night's shelter. "There's talk," Ellen says, lowering her voice, "of another protest, not like today's riot, something organized, workers and unemployed together, demanding real change. Will it work?" you ask. She shrugs. "Maybe not, but what's the alternative? Keep sleeping in coffins and hanging over ropes until we die." As you bid Ellen goodbye, promising to check on her and Maggie again soon, her words echo in your mind. What is the alternative? Individual charity helps temporarily, but changes nothing fundamental. Riots bring attention, but often harm the very people they're meant to help. Reform moves at a glacial pace while people freeze and starve in real time. The fog thickens as evening approaches, turning London into a ghost city of shadowy figures and muffled sounds. Your cough worsens with each breath of the toxic air. The 2 pennies in your pocket feel heavier with the knowledge that they're only half what you need. Near Covent Garden, you encounter a group of men huddled around a small fire in a metal barrel, the flames casting eerie shadows through the fog. "Penny for a spot by the fire," offers one, eyeing your workhouse clothes with the practiced assessment of someone who knows exactly how desperate you are. You hesitate, then hand over one of your precious pennies. The warmth is worth it, if only for a few minutes. Your fingers, numb with cold, tingle painfully as feeling returns. "Where you sleeping tonight?" asks the man who took your penny, a burly fellow with a scar running from eye to jaw. "Don't know yet," you admit. "Got 1 penny left, need 3 more for a coffin." He nods, unsurprised. "Could try the Arches. Some of us are heading there later. Safety in numbers." The Arches, the spaces beneath London's many railway bridges, were notorious homeless encampments. Dangerous, but free. They attracted those too poor or too proud for the workhouse. "Thanks," you say, "but I'm hoping to earn more before night." He shrugs. "Suit yourself. Offer stands if you change your mind." As you warm yourself, conversation swirls around the fire. News of the riot, rumours of police raids on homeless camps, stories of churches opening their doors for the particularly brutal nights, the shared intelligence of London's street community, vital information passed from person to person in the absence of newspapers or official notices for the poor. "Heard the Sally Army's opening extra space tonight," offers an elderly man, his beard more ice than hair in the freezing fog. "On account of the weather, might get in for less than usual." The news sparks hope. Perhaps the 4-penny coffin would accept 2 pennies tonight. As an emergency measure, it's worth trying, at least. You thank the men around the fire and continue toward Burn Street, moving carefully through fog so thick you can barely see a few feet ahead. The streets are eerily quiet, as though London itself is holding its breath in the frigid air. The queue outside the coffin house is even longer than the previous night, stretching around the corner and out of sight in the fog. Your heart sinks at the sight. They'll be turning people away long before you reach the front. "Looking for a bed?" asks a voice beside you. It's Billy, the coffin house boy. "Don't have enough," you admit, showing your 2 pennies. "Hoped they might make an exception in this weather." Billy shakes his head. "Not a chance. They're already packed. Something extra to share coffins tonight." He hesitates, then lowers his voice. "But I know another way, for them as only has a penny or 2. "The sit-up?" you ask, the prospect filling you with dread after experiencing the relative comfort of the coffin. "Nah, something else. Something new. Follow me." Intrigued, you follow Billy through the fog, away from the coffin house and deeper into the maze of East End streets. After several turns, you arrive at a nondescript building with no identifying signs. A small queue has formed outside, mostly women and children, with a few elderly men. "What is this place?" you ask. "Salvation Army Experimental Shelter," Billy explains proudly. "Captain Wilson runs it, different from the others. Pay what you can, even if it's nothing. No preaching, no work requirements, just shelter." It sounds too good to be true. "Why haven't I heard of it before?" Billy grins. "Because if everyone knew, it'd be overwhelmed. They keep it quiet, word of mouth only, for the most desperate." You join the queue, skeptical but hopeful. When you reach the front, a kindly-faced Salvation Army woman greets you with a smile, the first genuine smile you've received from an official in weeks. "What can you afford tonight?" she asks simply. 2 pennies, you reply, showing your coins. She nods. "That's fine. Through there, dinner's being served in the hall." Inside is unlike any shelter you've experienced. The main hall has tables and benches like the coffin house, but there's a notable absence of monitors with sticks. People eat and talk freely. Some even laugh, a sound so rare in the homeless shelters that it momentarily startles you. Dinner is basic, but nutritious. Vegetable soup, bread, and even a small piece of cheese. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, the warmth spreading through your body. "First time?" asks the woman who serves you. You nod. "Captain Wilson believes in dignity," she explains. "Says you can't save souls while stomping on them. Controversial, but he sticks to his principles. The sleeping arrangements are simple but humane. Mattresses on the floor of a large hall, segregated by gender but not by price. No coffins, no ropes, just a clean space to lie flat and sleep undisturbed." It's not luxury by any normal standard. The mattresses are thin, the hall is crowded, and privacy is non-existent, but compared to the sit-ups, hangovers, and even the coffins, it feels revolutionary. Shelter based on need rather than ability to pay. Assistance without humiliation. As you settle onto your assigned mattress, you wonder why this isn't the standard everywhere. Why most of London's poor are still forced to sit up all night for a penny or sleep in coffin-like boxes for 4. The answer, perhaps, lies in what the woman said about controversy. Captain Wilson's approach challenged the prevailing Victorian belief that the poor must be punished, controlled, and morally improved before they could be helped. By offering unconditional shelter, he questioned the very foundations of the poor law system. One shelter, one compassionate captain could never solve London's vast homelessness crisis, but perhaps it represented something important, the beginning of a shift in thinking, a recognition that the poor deserved dignity, not just survival, that homelessness was a social problem requiring social solutions, not just individual moral reform. As you listen from your comfortable modern bed, think about how radical such ideas were in Victorian London. The belief that all people deserve basic dignity, shelter, food, medical care, regardless of their ability to pay, was far from universally accepted. The battle between punitive and supportive approaches to poverty would continue for decades. Next, we'll see how these competing philosophies played out in the lives of London's homeless as the Victorian era drew to a close, and whether society's attitudes truly began to change. But for now, appreciate the simple dignity of your private space, your freedom to sleep when tired, your right to basic comfort. These weren't privileges extended to London's poor, who paid with pennies, labour, and often their lives for the meagre shelter of sit-ups, hangovers, and coffins. Morning at Captain Wilson's shelter arrives not with a clanging bell or shouting guards, but with daylight filtering through high windows and the gentle stirring of your fellow sleepers. No one rushes you out the door. No one demands immediate departure. Instead, a Salvation Army worker moves through the hall, quietly informing everyone that breakfast will be served shortly. The contrast with other shelters is stark enough to feel dreamlike. You half expect to wake up hanging over a rope or crammed in a wooden box, the humane treatment nothing but a cruel fantasy. But the breakfast is real. Porridge with actual milk, bread that isn't stale, and tea with sugar. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, still disbelieving of your luck in finding this place. Across the table sits a thin man in his 50s, meticulously breaking his bread into equal pieces before eating them one by one. "First time here?" he asks, noticing your expression. You nod. "Been coming 3 months now," he says. "Since Captain Wilson opened it, changed everything for me, was in the spikes before that, and the penny sit-ups when I could afford them. Why isn't every shelter like this?" you ask. The man snorts. "Powers that be don't want it. If all shelters treated us like humans, where's the punishment for being poor?" He taps the side of his nose knowingly. "Captain Wilson's fighting the whole system. Won't last. Mark my words. They'll shut him down eventually." His cynicism dampens your spirits, but you can't dispute his logic. Victorian society's approach to poverty was fundamentally punitive. The belief that making poverty uncomfortable would somehow reduce it. A shelter offering dignity challenged that entire philosophy. After breakfast, Captain Wilson himself addresses the assembled group, about 30 men and women of varying ages, all bearing the unmistakable look of long-term destitution. Unlike the stern, judgmental Salvation Army officers you've encountered elsewhere, Wilson is a slight, gentle-spoken man with kind eyes and a quiet voice that nonetheless commands attention. "The weather forecast suggests we've seen the worst of this winter," he announces, "but our doors remain open to all who need shelter, regardless of means. Pay what you can, when you can. Your humanity is not measured by the pennies in your pocket." A murmur of appreciation runs through the room. For many present, this may be the first time they've been spoken to with respect in months or even years. "For those seeking work," Wilson continues, "we have connections with several factories and shops willing to hire without references. See Sister Mary before you leave. For those needing medical attention, the volunteer doctor will be here at noon." The realization dawns gradually. This isn't just shelter, it's comprehensive support, not just keeping people alive for another night, but actually trying to help them escape the cycle of poverty. "He's mad, you know," says your breakfast companion, watching Wilson with a mixture of admiration and pity. "Completely against Salvation Army policy to run a shelter this way, using his family money to cover the shortfall. They'll transfer him somewhere remote when they get tired of the controversy." The man's predictions would prove partly right. Captain Wilson's experimental shelter would eventually close, but not before inspiring others. The seeds of a different approach were being planted, even if full harvest lay decades in the future. After breakfast, you approach Sister Mary about work possibilities. Your cough gives her pause, but she adds your name to a list. Factory on Commercial Road needs workers, she explains. Not pleasant work, sorting rags for paper making, but it's 6 shillings a week, enough for proper lodgings if you're careful. 6 shillings, 72 pennies, is a fortune by your recent standards. Enough for 18 nights in a coffin or a week in a proper lodging house with actual privacy. The prospect is dizzying. When would I start, you ask, trying to contain your excitement. They take on new people Mondays. Come back tomorrow morning and I'll send the first 10 on my list. She checks her paper. Number 7. Good chance. You leave the shelter buoyed by something you haven't felt in weeks. Hope. Not just for surviving another night, but for potentially escaping the penny-by-penny existence of London's homeless. Outside, the weather has shifted. The killing fog has lifted, and though still cold, there's a quality to the air that hints at eventual spring. Not warm by any measure, but less actively hostile to human life. With nowhere particular to go until tomorrow, and a guaranteed bed tonight, Captain Wilson's shelter allows multi-night stays, another radical departure from standard practice. You decide to walk. Not the desperate scavenging of recent days, but actual exploration. London in late Victorian times was a city of spectacular contrasts. Within a half-hour walk you could pass from the abject misery of the East End slums to the opulent wealth of the city's financial district. From starving children to overfed bankers, from open sewers to marble halls. As you walk west, the transformation is gradual but undeniable. Buildings grow taller, cleaner, more imposing. Streets widen. The people change too. Better dressed, healthier looking, walking with the confident stride of those who've never had to choose between food and shelter. Near the Bank of England, you pause, struck by the contrast between your workhouse clothes and the tailored suits of the businessmen hurrying past. They barely glance at you, these men whose pockets contain more money than you've seen in your entire life. To them, you're invisible, or perhaps just another unpleasant reminder of the costs of their prosperity. Move along, orders a policeman, eyeing your ragged appearance suspiciously. No loitering. In Victorian London, simply existing while poor in a wealthy area was enough to attract police attention. The unwritten rule was clear. Poverty should remain invisible to those who might be discomforted by its reality. You continue walking, eventually finding yourself near the Thames embankment. The river flows grey and sluggish, carrying the waste of millions toward the sea. Along its banks, hidden in shadows beneath bridges and behind walls, you spot the makeshift camps of those even worse off than yourself. People who couldn't or wouldn't use the shelters, preferring the dangerous freedom of outdoor sleeping to the controlled misery of the sit-ups and workhouses. A familiar figure hunches near the water's edge. Cooper, the man who shared his pennies for the coffin house. Cooper, you call, approaching carefully. He looks up, recognition dawning slowly on his haggard face. Ah, the coffin companion, wondered where you disappeared to last night. You explain about Captain Wilson's shelter, watching Cooper's expression shift from skepticism to cautious interest. Sounds too good to be true, he says. What's the catch? No catch that I could see, just basic decency. Cooper laughs, a harsh sound that turns into a racking cough. Basic decency? In London? To the poor? Now I know you're having me on. You persist, describing the shelter in detail. The mattresses, the real food, the work connections, the medical care. With each element, Cooper's disbelief visibly battles with desperate hope. And you're going back tonight? He asks finally. Yes, and tomorrow there might be factory work. You should come too. There's space. Cooper hesitates, years of disappointment and broken promises warring with the prospect of something better. Might do, he says noncommittally, if this damned cough lets up enough to walk that far. The cough worries you. It sounds worse than yesterday, deeper and wetter. There's a doctor at noon, free. That gets his attention. A real doctor, not some workhouse butcher? A real doctor, volunteer, the captain said. Cooper nods slowly. All right, help an old man up, will you? Let's see this miracle shelter of yours. The walk back to Whitechapel is slow, Cooper stopping frequently to rest or cough. By the time you reach Captain Wilson's shelter, the volunteer doctor has arrived. A young woman in a neat black dress with a medical bag. A lady doctor, Cooper whispers, scandalized despite his condition. Would you prefer to keep coughing? You counter. The doctor, Dr. Elizabeth Manning, according to the sister who introduces her, examines Cooper with brisk efficiency. Her diagnosis is unsurprising, but delivered with unusual compassion. Bronchitis, quite severe, she tells Cooper, possibly developing into pneumonia. You need warmth, rest, and proper food. She turns to Sister Mary. He should be in the infirmary. We're full, Mary replies apologetically, but he can stay here. We'll give him the corner spot near the stove. Dr. Manning nods, then addresses Cooper directly, another departure from typical medical practice with the poor, who were often discussed as though not present. I'll leave medicine for the cough and fever. Take it exactly as directed. Rest as much as possible. No alcohol, it will make everything worse. She presses a small bottle into his hand. I'll check on you tomorrow. Cooper stares at the bottle in disbelief. Just like that? No charge? No workhouse admission? Just like that, Dr. Manning confirms with a small smile. Captain Wilson believes healthcare should be based on need, not means. After the doctor moves on to other patients, Cooper turns to you with bewilderment. Who are these people? Saints? Reformers, you reply, remembering your conversations with Ellen. People who think the whole system needs changing. Cooper shakes his head slowly. Won't work. Not in my lifetime, anyway. Too many powerful folks benefiting from things staying exactly as they are. His cynicism is understandable, but not entirely justified. Change was coming to Victorian London, albeit slowly and unevenly. Reformers like Charles Booth were meticulously documenting poverty's true causes and extent. Settlement houses like Toynbee Hall were bringing the wealthy and poor into direct contact, breaking down stereotypes. Women like Dr. Elizabeth Manning were entering professions previously closed to them, often bringing different perspectives on social problems. Even the Salvation Army itself, for all its stern moralism, represented a shift from pure punishment to at least partial support for the poor. Captain Wilson might be an outlier in his methods, but he wasn't alone in questioning whether the destitute deserved dignity as well as bare survival. That evening you help Cooper to his promised spot near the stove in the men's sleeping hall. The medicine has eased his cough somewhat, and the warmth brings colour to his grey cheeks. Never thought I'd end up here, he muses, watching the other shelter residents prepare their mattresses for the night. 62 years old, worked since I was 8, thought I'd have something to show for it by now. What did you do, you ask, realising you know almost nothing about the man beside you. Or railway porter mostly. Good job until the accident. Train took my foot. He pulls up his trouser leg to reveal a crude wooden prosthesis strapped to his shin. Company gave me a few pounds compensation. When that ran out, there was nothing. No one wants a one-legged porter. His story was common enough. Victorian London had no meaningful safety net for those injured at work, no ongoing disability support, no retraining programs, just a small lump sum payment, then the stark choice between family charity, if you had family, the workhouse or the streets. What about tomorrow's factory work, you ask? Would they take someone with your condition? Cooper shrugs. Rag sorting doesn't need 2 good legs, I suppose. Just have to be faster with my hands to make up for it. He coughs again, weaker this time, assuming this cough doesn't finish me first. That night, as you lie on your mattress listening to the sounds of 30 men breathing, coughing, and occasionally crying out in troubled sleep, you reflect on the randomness of Victorian destitution, Cooper's train accident, Ellen's husband crushed by falling lumber. Jack's... Whatever took Jack to the streets before you met him? None chose poverty, none deserved it by any reasonable moral standard, yet all suffered as though they had committed terrible crimes, punished by a system that viewed their very existence as problematic. Morning brings renewed hope. It's Monday, the day new workers are sent to the commercial road factory. You wake early, both excited and nervous. Sister Mary had said you were 7th on the list, but what if there were changes? What if the factory decided they needed fewer workers? At breakfast, you notice Cooper's absence from his spot by the stove. Infirmary, explains another man, seeing your concern. Fever spiked in the night. Dr. Manning came early and had him moved. Your heart sinks. Another friend, another illness. The pattern feels grimly familiar. The shelter infirmary, you ask, remembering Mary had said it was full. The man nods. Captain made space, said the old fellow wouldn't survive a workhouse hospital. At least Cooper was getting proper care, not left to die on a workhouse pallet like Jack. It was a small mercy, but in Victorian London, small mercies were often all the poor could hope for. After breakfast, you join the group waiting for factory placement. 9 men and women of various ages, all showing the same mixture of hope and skepticism on their worn faces. Sister Mary arrives with a 10th person, Ellen without Maggie. "Ellen!" you exclaim. "Where's Maggie?" "School," she says, with evident pride. "Captain Wilson arranged it. They're taking her at the mission school, no fees." The idea of Maggie in school rather than begging or scavenging on London streets feels like a small miracle. Education was the most reliable escape route from poverty, but usually completely inaccessible to homeless children. "I couldn't take factory work before," Ellen explains, "not with Maggie to watch. But now..." As Sister Mary leads your group through London's morning bustle, you and Ellen exchange stories of the past days. She's been at Captain Wilson's shelter almost from the beginning, one of his first success stories as Maggie's health improved with regular meals and warm sleeping quarters. "The captain says I can train as a laundress once I've saved enough from the factory," she tells you. "Skilled work, better wages." The commercial road factory is a hulking brick building belching smoke from multiple chimneys. The noise hits you before you even enter. The clatter of machinery, shouts of foremen, the general din of industrial production. Inside is a vision of Victorian industry at its most chaotic. Enormous rooms filled with workers sorting vast piles of rags, everything from fine silks to filthy burlap, all destined to become paper. The air is thick with dust and lint, making everyone cough. The heat from steam-powered machines is oppressive after the winter cold outside. A stern-faced manager inspects your group like livestock at auction, checking hands for dexterity, eyes for sharpness, lungs for stamina. 3 are rejected immediately: an elderly woman, a man with an obvious limp, and a youth who can't stop coughing in the dusty air. You hold your breath during your own inspection, willing your lungs to cooperate. The manager pinches your forearm, grunts with satisfaction at finding some muscle, and moves on. You've passed. Ellen passes too. 6 of the original 10 are accepted, assigned workstations, and given brief instructions. The pay is as promised, 6 shillings a week, with an extra shilling bonus for those who exceed their sorting quotas. The work is mind-numbing but straightforward. You stand at a table piled with rags, sorting them by material type and quality into different bins. Cotton here, wool there, linen in another, silk in its own special container. Hour after hour, your hands move mechanically while your mind drifts. By day's end, your back aches, your fingers are raw, and you've breathed in so much lint that every cough brings up coloured phlegm. But you've completed your first day of proper employment since arriving in London, when the foreman hands you a shilling for the day's work. It feels like victory. Outside, Ellen waits, her own shilling clutched tightly. "We did it," she says, grinning despite her obvious exhaustion. Honest work, honest pay. You walk back to the shelter together, comparing notes on your respective workstations, bosses, and sorting techniques. The simple normalcy of the conversation, two workers discussing their jobs, feels alien after weeks of focusing solely on survival. At the shelter, you immediately ask after Cooper. Sister Mary's expression tells you everything before she speaks. "The fever broke this afternoon," she says gently, but his heart gave out shortly after. He went peacefully. The news hits with surprising force. You'd known Cooper only briefly, yet his death feels like a personal loss, another victim of Victorian London's brutal indifference to the poor. "We're having a small service tonight," Mary continues. "Captain Wilson believes everyone deserves to be mourned properly." The service is indeed small, just shelter residents gathered in the main hall, Captain Wilson reading a brief but dignified eulogy for a man he barely knew. No family attends, no long-time friends, just a collection of fellow homeless who understood better than most how easily they could be next. "Cooper came to us too late," Wilson says, addressing the assembled group. "The streets had already taken too heavy a toll on his body, but he died with dignity, in a clean bed, with medical care and human kindness. That should be the right of every person, not a rare privilege." Several older residents nod in agreement, perhaps seeing their own potential fate in Cooper's. "We cannot save everyone," Wilson continues. "The problem is too vast, the resources too few, the opposition too entrenched, but we can save some. We can demonstrate a better way. We can refuse to accept that poverty must equal degradation." After the service, you approach Captain Wilson, wanting to express gratitude for his treatment of Cooper. "Will there be a proper burial?" you ask. "Not a pauper's grave?" Wilson nods. "We have an arrangement with the church cemetery, individual plots, marked graves. It's not much, but it's acknowledgement that each life matters." The contrast with Jack's anonymous workhouse burial couldn't be starker. Same poverty, same illness, completely different treatment in death based solely on where each man happened to draw his last breath. That night, lying on your shelter mattress with a shilling from honest work in your pocket and the prospect of 5 more by week's end, you realise something has fundamentally shifted, not just your individual circumstances, but your understanding of what's possible. Captain Wilson's shelter, the factory job, Dr. Manning's medical care, Maggie's school placement, all represented alternatives to the punitive approach that dominated Victorian poverty management. Small islands of dignity in a sea of deliberate humiliation, proof that different choices could be made if society valued the poor as fully human. As the Victorian era drew to a close, these alternative approaches were gradually gaining ground, not rapidly enough to save Jack or Cooper or countless others, not comprehensively enough to remake the entire system, but enough to plant seeds of change that would eventually flourish. The reform movements of the late Victorian period, from Charles Booth's poverty mapping to settlement houses to medical volunteers to Captain Wilson's experimental shelter, all challenged the fundamental assumption that poverty was primarily a moral failing deserving punishment. They suggested instead that poverty was largely structural, requiring structural solutions. As you drift towards sleep, physically exhausted but mentally hopeful for perhaps the first time since arriving in London, you wonder what society might look like if Captain Wilson's approach became the norm rather than the radical exception, if the poor were treated with dignity as a matter of course, not rare charity, if the focus shifted from punishment to support. The answer to that question lay decades in the future, beyond the Victorian era altogether. The full development of what would eventually become the welfare state was still generations away, but the first fragile shoots were emerging, nurtured by reformers who refused to accept that human dignity should depend on economic status. As you listen from your comfortable bed in the modern world, remember that the distance between Cooper's death in a charity infirmary and today's social safety nets was traversed in painful increments. Each small reform, each Captain Wilson, each Dr. Manning, each Charles Booth pushing against deeply entrenched beliefs about poverty and worthiness. Next, we'll see how these competing visions for addressing poverty continued to evolve as the Victorian era ended, and whether our protagonist's tentative hope for a better future was justified. But for now, appreciate not just the physical comforts of your modern life, but the moral evolution that made them possible, the gradual, hard-won recognition that all humans deserve certain basics: shelter, food, medical care, education, not as charity, but as rights. This idea, still radical in late Victorian London, would eventually transform how society viewed its most vulnerable members. 6 days at the rag-sorting factory pass in a blur of exhaustion, lint, and steadily accumulating shillings. By Saturday afternoon, when the foreman distributes the week's wages, you've earned the full 6 shillings plus an extra 6p bonus for exceeding your quota. 6 shillings and 6p, 78 pennies, more money than you've had at once since arriving in London. Ellen has done even better, earning a full extra shilling for her swift, deft sorting. You both stand outside the factory gates, staring at your wages with a mixture of disbelief and pride. "What will you do with it?" she asks. "You've thought of little else all week." "Find proper lodgings," you reply. "Somewhere with a real bed and a door that closes." "Not spending it all on gin and a spree," she teases. "That's what the factory owner thinks we'll do. Why, he pays weekly instead of daily, claims we can't be trusted with too much money at once." The assumption that the poor were inherently irresponsible with money was deeply embedded in Victorian thinking. It justified paying wages at intervals that left workers perpetually in debt to landlords and shopkeepers. It rationalised the refusal to provide direct financial assistance. It even explained the preference for shelters over cash support, the belief that given money, the poor would simply drink it away. "What about you?" you ask. "Will you stay at Captain Wilson's?" Ellen nods. "For now, saving every penny I can. Captain says if I keep steady work for 6 months, he'll help me find a proper room for me and Maggie." She smiles, the expression transforming her careworn face. Maggie's teacher says she's quick with numbers, might even get a scholarship someday. The thought of Maggie, born in a workhouse, nearly dead of illness on the streets, potentially receiving an education that could lift her out of poverty entirely, feels like witnessing a minor miracle, a testament to what's possible when people are given support rather than punishment. That evening, you bid farewell to Captain Wilson's shelter. Not permanently, you'll continue visiting Ellen and Maggie, but as a resident. Wilson himself wishes you well. "Remember," he says, "a setback doesn't mean failure. Our door remains open if you ever need to return." His understanding of poverty's precariousness, how easily progress can be reversed by illness, accident, or simple bad luck, is unusual among Victorian charity workers, who often viewed returning recipients as moral failures who hadn't tried hard enough. With directions from Sister Mary, you make your way to a lodging house on Commercial Street that caters to factory workers. For 3 shillings weekly, you secure a tiny room of your own, barely larger than a coffin in truth, but with actual walls, a narrow bed with real sheets, a small table, and most precious of all, a door that locks. The landlady, Mrs. Perkins, is a brisk widow who runs her establishment with military precision. Rent due Saturday evening, she informs you. No alcohol, no women, no rowdiness. Breakfast provided, other meals your own affair. Break the rules, you're out without refund. The rules are strict but fair, and the privacy is worth every restriction. That first night in your own room lying on a real mattress with an actual pillow beneath your head, the contrast with the sit-ups, hangovers and coffins is so stark it brings tears to your eyes. No monitors with sticks, no rope cutting at dawn, no wooden box pressing against your shoulders, no coughing strangers inches away, just blessed solitude and the luxury of sleeping without permission or payment beyond your weekly rent. The coming weeks establish a new routine. Factory work 6 days a week. Evenings spent either in your room or visiting Ellen and Maggie at the shelter. Sundays free for rest or exploration of London beyond the East End. Your health improves with regular meals and proper sleep. The constant cough that plagued you throughout the winter fades as spring truly arrives, warming London's streets and clearing its notorious fogs. The factory remains harsh, dusty, loud, exhausting, but the steady income transforms your existence from desperate survival to modest stability. You're no longer one missed penny away from the streets. You have options, limited but real. Captain Wilson's prediction proves partly correct. His experimental shelter does indeed draw criticism from Salvation Army leadership, uncomfortable with its departure from the organization's emphasis on moral reform alongside material support. But rather than shut it down completely, they compromise. The shelter remains open, though with more traditional religious services added to the daily routine. Ellen and Maggie stay there through spring and into summer. Maggie's education progresses remarkably, her quick mind blossoming with proper nutrition and stimulation. Ellen masters advanced techniques in the rag factory, earning consistent bonuses that bring her weekly wages to nearly 8 shillings, a fortune by the standards of London's working poor. One Sunday in late summer, you visit them at the shelter, bringing small gifts, a hair ribbon for Maggie, a sturdy work apron for Ellen. You find them in the shelter's small garden, Maggie practicing her letters while Ellen mends clothes. "We have news," Ellen announces, unable to contain her smile. "Captain Wilson found us a room, in a proper house with a respectable family, 2 shillings weekly plus helping with their laundry business." "When do you move?" you ask, genuinely delighted for them. "Next Saturday," Maggie pipes up, clearly excited, "and I'm staying in school. The captain arranged everything." Their progress from desperate street survival to stability feels personally significant, a vindication of the belief that poverty isn't inevitable or deserved, but can be overcome with proper support. As summer turns to autumn, London transforms again. The killing heat of August, almost as dangerous to the poor as winter's cold, gives way to more temperate days. The streets fill with vendors selling the harvest bounty. Even the East End seems less grim in the golden light of September. Your own circumstances continue to improve incrementally. A promotion at the factory moves you from rag sorting to operating one of the simpler machines. With a corresponding increase in wages, you're able to afford better food, an occasional new item of clothing, even small luxuries like a book or newspaper. One crisp October evening, walking back to your lodgings from the factory, you pass a Salvation Army shelter, not Captain Wilson's, but a traditional penny sit-up. The queue outside is already forming, men and women with the same hollow-eyed desperation you recognize from your own time on the streets. You stop, hand straying to the coins in your pocket. You could help someone, pay for a coffin instead of a sit-up, make one night marginally more bearable for a stranger. But as you watch, the futility of such a gesture becomes clear. One night's slightly better shelter wouldn't change anything fundamental. The person would still wake tomorrow with the same lack of options, the same desperate scramble for pennies, the same choice between inadequate alternatives. What had made the difference for you wasn't charity but opportunity, steady work, proper housing, education for those like Maggie, the things Captain Wilson's approach prioritized over the moral policing and deliberate discomfort of traditional shelters. As winter approaches again, you can't help remembering the previous year, the desperate nights in sit-ups and hangovers, the brief luxury of the coffin, Jack's death in the workhouse, Cooper's more dignified but equally final end at Captain Wilson's. Despite your relative stability, you remain acutely aware of how precarious your position is. One accident at the factory, one serious illness, one unscrupulous landlord, and you could easily find yourself back in the queue for a penny sit-up or two-penny hangover. This understanding that poverty is often circumstantial rather than characterological was gradually spreading among Victorian reformers, though far too slowly for those suffering in the present. December brings an unexpected encounter. Passing through Spitalfields Market, you spot a familiar face. Billy, the boy from the coffin house. He's taller now, his clothes somewhat better, though still obviously poor. "Remember me?" he asks, grinning the same gap-toothed smile, though with a few more adult teeth now. "Of course," you reply. "Still at the coffins?" He shakes his head. "Got proper work now, delivery boy for a printer, sleep in his attic even." His pride is evident. "What about you? Still hanging over ropes?" You laugh. "Factory work, got a room on Commercial Street, moved up in the world, eh? Both of us." There's something heartening about Billy's progress, another data point suggesting that with the right opportunities, escape from absolute poverty is possible. Not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. "They're changing things, you know," Billy tells you. At the coffins and hangovers, Captain Wilson's ideas catching on bit by bit, some places letting people sleep flat without paying the full 4 pennies, some even giving blankets now. These small improvements might seem trivial by modern standards, the bare minimum of human dignity, but represented significant shifts in how Victorian society approached homelessness. The recognition that even the destitute deserved certain basics was slowly taking root. As the new year approaches, Ellen invites you to join her family for a modest Christmas celebration in their new room. The space is small but immaculately kept, transformed by Ellen's careful touches into a true home. Maggie proudly shows you her school achievements, neat rows of sums and letters, a certificate for good attendance. "Never thought we'd have this," Ellen confesses quietly, while Maggie arranges her few treasured possessions. "After James died, I was sure we'd end in the workhouse, or worse. Captain Wilson made the difference, you suggest." She considers this, partly, but also luck. Being in the right place when his shelter opened, Maggie surviving that first winter, the factory having openings. She looks around her simple room with evident satisfaction. Most don't get these chances. Ellen's assessment is brutally accurate. For every success story like hers or yours or Billy's, thousands remained trapped in Victorian London's cycle of poverty, moving between inadequate shelter options, workhouses, and the streets until disease or exposure or simple exhaustion claimed them. The fundamental problem wasn't the quality of individual shelters, but their existence as the primary response to poverty. Penny sit-ups, 2-penny hangovers, and 4-penny coffins treated the symptom, homelessness, rather than the cause, economic inequality, lack of social support, exploitative labour practices. Even the best of them, Captain Wilson's experimental approach, could only help a limited number of people. Systemic problems required systemic solutions, which wouldn't emerge until well into the next century. As the Victorian era drew to a close with Queen Victoria's death in 1901, the conversation around poverty was noticeably shifting. Charles Booth's meticulous research had thoroughly debunked the notion that poverty was primarily due to moral failings. Settlement houses had brought middle and upper-class formers into direct contact with the realities of slum life. Medical professionals like Dr. Manning had documented the physical costs of destitution. The groundwork was being laid for more comprehensive approaches to poverty. Old age pensions, introduced in 1908, national insurance, 1911, eventually the full welfare state after World War II, the painfully slow recognition that society had collective responsibility for its most vulnerable members. Yet change came too gradually for those suffering in the present. Even as reforms began, penny sit-ups, 2-penny hangovers and 4-penny coffins continued to operate, necessary evils in a society still unwilling to guarantee basic dignities to all. One bitter January evening walking home from the factory, you pass the old coffin house on Burn Street. The queue outside is longer than ever, people huddled against the cold, clutching their precious pennies for a night in a wooden box. You pause, memories flooding back, the hardness of the bench in the sit-up, the rope cutting into your chest in the hangover, the narrow confines of the coffin, Jack's hollow cough, Cooper's weathered face, the constant grinding fear that tomorrow might not yield enough pennies for shelter. A young man at the back of the queue catches your eye, his expression a mirror of your own desperation a year earlier. "First time?" you ask, knowing the answer from his bewildered look. He nods. "Try Captain Wilson's shelter on Flower and Dean Street," you tell him. "Pay what you can, they'll help with work too." His expression shifts from confusion to cautious hope. "They'll take nothing, I've only got 2pence. That's enough. Tell them," you hesitate. "Tell them you deserve dignity, not just survival." It's a small intervention, one person directed to a marginally better option, but perhaps the most meaningful help you can offer. Not charity that maintains the status quo, but information that might change someone's trajectory entirely. As the Victorian era gave way to the Edwardian and beyond, the penny sit-ups, 2-penny hangovers and 4-penny coffins gradually disappeared, not because poverty was solved, far from it, but because society's approach to it evolved. The deliberate discomfort and moral policing gave way to more humane, though still inadequate, support systems. The legacy of these strange, cruel shelters lies partly in what they reveal about Victorian attitudes toward poverty, the belief that the poor must prove their worthiness through suffering, that charity should never be too comfortable, that hardship was character-building rather than soul-destroying. But their legacy also lies in the reactions they provoked. The reformers like Captain Wilson, who insisted on dignity rather than mere survival. The researchers like Charles Booth, who documented the structural rather than moral causes of poverty. The doctors like Elizabeth Manning, who treated the poor as patients rather than problems. Your own journey from desperate homelessness to modest stability mirrors the larger social evolution, halting, imperfect, with many left behind, but moving gradually toward a more compassionate understanding of human need. As years pass, you sometimes visit the sites where the sit-ups, hangovers and coffins once operated. Most have been repurposed or demolished, London constantly rebuilding itself over the bones of its past. The physical structures may be gone, but their shadow remains in how we think about poverty and worthiness, in the ongoing debate about who deserves help and on what terms. Ellen and Maggie's fortunes continue to rise modestly. By 1905, Maggie has indeed secured a scholarship to continue her education beyond the elementary level, practically unheard of for a girl of her background. Ellen manages the laundry business herself now, having bought it from her aging employers with years of carefully saved shillings. Your own path remains steady, if unspectacular. Factory work leading eventually to a position as floor manager, a larger room upgrading to a small apartment, a life that would have seemed impossibly secure during those desperate days of hanging over ropes or sleeping in wooden boxes. Sometimes, on cold winter nights, you still wake suddenly, momentarily disoriented, expecting to find yourself on a bench with a monitor's stick prodding your shoulder, or crowded into a coffin-shaped box surrounded by coughing strangers. The psychological scars of extreme poverty don't fade completely, even when its physical realities are left behind. These moments of remembrance serve a purpose, though, keeping alive the understanding of how easily fate can turn, how thin the line between stability and destitution, how much individual outcomes depend on systemic supports or their absence. The penny sit-ups, 2-penny hangovers and 4-penny coffins of Victorian London represent both the callousness and the limited compassion of their era, inadequate solutions to profound problems, yet still preferable to nothing at all for those forced to use them. Their story matters not just as historical curiosity, but as a measure of how far we've come in recognizing human dignity as universal rather than earned through moral performance or economic success, and perhaps as a warning of how easily such gains can be reversed if we forget their hard-won lessons. As you lie in your comfortable modern bed, free from the constraints of Victorian poverty, free from the nightly scramble for pennies to avoid the streets, free from the indignity of sit-ups, hangovers and coffins, remember that this freedom isn't just physical, but philosophical. The freedom to see poverty as a social problem requiring collective solutions rather than individual moral failings deserving punishment. This shift in understanding, still incomplete, still contested, may be the most important legacy of those strange, cruel shelters where human beings once paid pennies for the privilege of sitting up all night, hanging over ropes or sleeping in coffin-shaped boxes. Feel the softness of your mattress, the warmth of your blanket, the privacy of your space. These comforts aren't just material luxuries that separate you from Victorian London's homeless. They represent the recognition that all humans deserve certain basics: shelter, rest, dignity, not as rewards for good behavior or proof of moral worth, but simply because they are human. Let that recognition carry you gently toward sleep, grateful for how far we've come, mindful of how far we still have to go.